We are talking about the primaries. Election equals old white guy parade. Essentially, we have two old white guys on the screen. We are talking about the primary runoff election first. We're going to talk about the Republican ballot, and then we're going to talk about the Democratic ballot. And then we are going to talk about the Jefferson County municipal election, which we'll see if anybody hangs out until we start talking about that municipal election. And I guarantee you probably 100 people are going to vote in some of those races. I said this earlier. I guarantee like 100 people are going to vote in each one of those races, much less watch the selection guide. I usually don't put a lot of work into races that I don't feel like a whole lot of people are going to watch. And for whatever reason, I decided to do that this time. So we're going to be talking about things like the Jefferson County Water Control and Improvement District, number 10, which covers a small unincorporated area of Jefferson County right outside of Nederland. Which, like I said, that's where I live. Hey, yo, see? Look at that. We have one person who might benefit from. Do you really? You pay your water bill to the WCID? Because that's how it works. And yes, that's water district 10. So we're going to talk about almost nothing about your race because it's insanely difficult to find any details on candidates for races that small. But I have a couple of details, so we'll talk about them. They finally let us do auto pay. Finally, in 2026. Good Lord. Also, make them fix the sewer lines. I have no capacity to be able to make candidates do anything in any of these races. Okay, here we go. So, use your immense power. I cannot do that, for I have none. We are going to talk first about the primary runoff for 2026. Your last day to register to vote. This is where I try to time Blaine's followers unite to fight my personal battles. This is where this is why I do these election guides at the time that I do them. I try to get them out before the deadline to register to vote. So the election for the primary runoff is going to be May 26th. The deadline to register for that election is this Monday, April 27th. So if you have not registered to vote, I've got a link right here. I can put it in the chat. This is the Texas Secretary of State's website. If you just Google, what did I Google? Texas Secretary of State, am I registered to vote? If you just Google that, it'll be the first result here. This is a very handy dandy, useful, easy to use tool. I'll pop that in chat. So you can click on that in chat and that will take you to make sure that you register to vote. I highly recommend that you go and double check your voter registration, especially in Texas, because we love taking, hundreds of thousands of people at a time off of our voter rolls, especially whenever they have a kind of Hispanic sounding last name like mine. So I always go and double check that my voter registration is active. It currently is. And so I highly recommend that you go and do that as well. Go to that link right there in the chat. If you're watching the VOD, it's down there in the corner. The last day to register to vote is this coming Monday, April 27th. And then early voting starts Monday, May 18th and goes through Friday, May 22nd. Just 5 days of early voting is kind of crazy, that they kind of not restrict, but not as many people are going to come out and vote in a primary, much less in a primary runoff. And so they don't devote nearly the same kind of resources to manning polling locations that they usually do in other races. So there's only 5 days of early voting, Monday through Friday, May 18th through May 22nd, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. And these are all of your locations in Jefferson County where you can go and vote in early voting. You got Rogers Park in Beaumont, and then you have the courthouse in Beaumont, the John Paul Davis Community Center on Lucas. I don't know where that is. and then the Theodore Johns Library, which is right there at Rogers Park. So two voting locations in the West End, one in the North End and one in the South End. So early voting will be May 18th through May 22nd. We got a little bit of time, but this is going to give people plenty of time to go and watch this entire voter guide before they go and vote. And that'll give me plenty of time to chop it up and start posting it the closer we get to early voting starting. And just a little announcement here at the top of the stream. Tiffany Perkins has agreed to come back on the broadcast. She's probably going to come back on the broadcast next Saturday. So you want to look out for that. Tiffany Perkins is a Democratic candidate for State Board of Education District 7, and she got the most votes in the primary, but because we have ridiculous majority of voting results, I guess is what you would call it. I don't know. In Texas, you can't just win by getting the most votes. You have to get a majority of the votes. And this has historically been used in Texas to disenfranchise people of color. If like one black person at a town runs for mayor and two white people in the town run for mayor, then the two white candidates are going to split the white vote and the black candidate is going to get the entire black vote. And so if you just did it to where whoever got the most votes wins, then it would be, dangerous and scary that the black candidate might be the person who got the most votes and therefore would become the next mayor. So they instituted during the Jim Crow era this majority rule for elections in Texas so that if there are three people running like that, two white candidates and one black candidate. Of course, none of this is explicitly spelled out. But if there are three candidates like that, two white candidates and one black candidate, and the black candidate gets the most votes, but not the majority of votes, then you eliminate the person that got the least amount of votes, which would be one of the white candidates. And then the two top vote getters go head to head. And obviously then the entire white population is going to fall in line behind the white candidate for mayor, and then it becomes far less likely that you get minority representation in local government. So that's exciting. So in Texas, we have this majority rule for our elections, which means many of our candidates in our primaries did not get the majority of their votes. They got the most votes in their elections, but not the majority. So now we're having a runoff election so that these candidates can earn the majority of votes. We're just having the top two vote getters from the primaries go head to head. And Tiffany Perkins got the most votes in her primary on March 3rd, but she did not get the majority of votes. So now she's going to head with Deborah Ambrose, and she's going to win. She has to win because she's great. And she has a really good shot, I think, as much as Democratic voters are coming out kind of en masse. I don't speak French. As much as Democratic voters are coming out in the state of Texas, I think Tiffany has a really good chance to beat Julie Pickren, who is an insane person, who is our current District 7 State Board of Education rep. She is from the Woodlands, and she was at January 6th. So that's exciting. But we will talk about that more next Saturday whenever Tiffany Perkins comes on the broadcast. That's exciting. And look at that. We also explained the reason why we're doing runoffs here. We've already talked about everything on this slide. Early voting is May 18th to May 22nd. And then election day will be Tuesday, May 26th. Very importantly, for the runoff election, this is the only election that you're ever going to experience that this rule applies to. Well, I mean, primary runoff elections are the only kinds of elections that this rule applies to. Very importantly, you can only vote in the runoff for the same party that you voted for in the primary. So if you voted for the Republican ballot in the primary, whenever you go in this time, you have to tell them, I want to vote in the Republican primary runoff, because if you switch and vote the Democratic primary runoff, it'll see that whenever your votes are submitted in the system, and it'll disregard all of your votes. So you want to make sure that you vote in the same party that you voted for in the primary. If you did not vote in the March 3rd primaries, then you can vote for whichever party you want. But if you did vote in the March 3rd primary, that vote is going to be in the system as whichever party you voted for. And therefore, if you vote for a different party, it'll screw you up and they'll disregard your votes. So go and select the ballot for the party that you voted for in the primary. You need to have voter registration. Like I said, actually, real quick, before we get onto voter registration, these are all of your polling locations for early voting. These are all of your polling locations for election day voting. Obviously, there are many, many more of them all throughout the Jefferson County area. I can't imagine that you're going to have a very hard time getting into any of these locations at any time, even on election day, to vote in a primary runoff. We certainly see very little voter turnout in primary runoffs. So I wouldn't worry super hard about being very punctual for these. But yeah, these are all of your voting locations for election day. You're going to go to the polling location. Whenever you get to the polling location, you want to make sure there's a lot of information that we're going to talk about tonight. And if you need to remember some of the information that we talked about tonight, like you're not going to be able to remember every single candidate that you want to pick on your ballot, you need to make sure that you write that information on a piece of paper and bring that piece of paper with you, because you will not be able to be on your phone while you are in the polling location. So you're going to pull up to the polling location. A very nice person is going to say, look, come this way, but make sure that you're not on your phone, because they passed an awesome voter suppression law to get people kicked out of polling places if they happen to pull their phone out. It's ridiculous. Then once you walk past the kindly, usually it's an old lady, kindly old lady who told you don't be on your phone, right this way to your to the election workers. You're going to walk into the main polling location, and you'll see a table full of election workers. Those you just walk up to any one of them, whichever one is free, and those election workers are going to have you give them your voter ID. These are all of your acceptable forms of Texas voter ID. It's pretty easy to have a driver's license. That is what most people are going to use. You can also use all of these other, like you can use a passport or citizen certificate. You can also use a Texas handgun license, because of course you can in the state of Texas. If your driver's license is expired, that's okay, as long as it is within a 4-year window. It'll be fine. Even if it is expired for voters age 70 and older, because of course we have to make voting as easy as possible for the oldest portion of our population. For voters 70 years and older, any photo ID, regardless of whether or not it's been expired for 1,000,000 years, is acceptable. So these are your forms of voter identification. You're going to give them your voter your identification. They're going to scan it or whatever, and they're going to tell you to pick between 3 different blank pieces of paper that are on the table in front of them. This is going to be the physical piece of paper that your ballot is printed on. Your choices that you make on the ballot are going to be printed on, because everything has to be on paper. We can't have it on computers because election interference, which is not actually a thing, but Republicans have to fearmonger. And so you're going to get a physical blank piece of paper. They're going to give you a choice between 3 different pieces of paper. That's just security theater. It makes it feel like, oh, secure. You pick one of the pieces of paper at random. And then they're going to say, okay, right over here to the polling machines. And you're going to arrive at a polling machine. It's going to have a big screen in front of you. And in the bottom right-hand corner, it's going to have a little slot where you're going to insert your blank piece of paper. Once you insert your blank piece of paper, bring me that back. you will see your ballot. So let's say, important step I forgot to talk about is whenever you're talking to the voter, the election worker who is going to give you that blank piece of paper, they're going to ask you, do you want to vote in the Republican or the Democratic primary? And you tell them, you got to make sure, like I said, if you voted in the primaries on March 3rd, you need to make sure that you pick the same primary to vote in this time. So you voted for like the Democrats like I did on March 3rd. So whenever you walk in this time, you say, I want to vote in the Democratic primary. And they will say, okay. And they take your piece of paper and they scan a little barcode onto it. And that means you're voting in the Democratic Party. So then you take a piece of paper, then you walk to the machine with a big screen. You put the paper in the right hand, the slot in the bottom right hand corner. And on your screen will appear your ballot in digitized form. It'll be a big touch screen. And all you do is you tap the bubbles to fill the bubbles in and vote for the candidates of your choice. This is what your ballot will look like if you are voting for the Republicans. This is what your ballot will look like if you're voting for the Democrats. We have 5 different Democratic races that we're going to talk about tonight and 4 Republican races that we're going to talk about tonight. It'll pull up something that looks like this on your screen. You tap the bubbles, you fill them in for your choices. You can pick, for all of these, you just pick one. But whenever we talk about the municipal election later, which we will talk about much later, some of these multiple candidates will be elected. So you can select more than one. So you want to pay attention. It'll say on here, vote for none or one, or vote for none, one, or two. It'll say like the ones that you can vote for more than one. But for the primaries right now, which is what we're talking about, you're only going to vote for one of these candidates. Or you can choose not to vote for any of the candidates on here. So you tap the bubbles, you fill in the ones that you want to fill in, and then you click submit. And very importantly, you have not voted at this point. You tap the bubbles, you click submit, but the machine now is going to spit out your piece of paper again, the piece of paper that you put in it whenever you started filling in the ballot. Now it's going to spit out that piece of paper, and on it will be printed the choices that you made on the vote tabulating machine. And so now there's a physical record of exactly the choices that you made on your ballot. And you have to take that piece of paper and you have to walk to a separate machine by the entrance and put that piece of paper inside the tabulating machine. If you do not put the piece of paper inside the second machine, then your votes will not be counted. Heavy sighs. I am not from Texas, but this is still very interesting to listen to. Thank you so much, Heavy sighs. That is appreciated. Yeah, and unfortunately, none of this is going to apply to you tonight. Sorry. But yeah, if it's interesting to listen to, you just keep on listening to it. What was I saying? You got to make sure you take that machine over to this. You got to make sure that you take that piece of paper over to the second machine, the second vote tabulating machine. You put your piece of paper into that one. Usually that's where you're going to get your little I voted sticker. And you always want to get that so that you can wear it and show off that you participated in democracy that day. But you put your piece of paper in the second machine, and now your votes have been officially submitted. Very importantly, if you just fill out the bubbles on the machine and hit submit, you have not submitted your votes. You have to take the piece of paper to the second machine. That is something that is always, just like there are going to be election workers in the polling location. They're going to be able to explain all that to you, so you'll be fine. But the first time I ever did it, I was like, oh, this is weird. So I always probably over-explain that bit, but it's important. What else? I think we talked about everything that we need to about how to actually go and vote. Are there any questions in the chat? From from just heavy sighs, apparently. Are there any questions in the chat about how to actually go about voting here in Jefferson County in Texas? If there are not, then we will move on to talking about the candidates for Republicans first, and then we will talk about the Democrats. There's a bug floating around in here, and I'm always nervous. Like I have like a cup of coffee here, and one time like a little gnat like that got inside my coffee, And like, I went to go drink it and I saw it in there and I was like, oh God. So now I'm always paranoid. Like whenever there's bugs flying around, I have my coffee. Anyways. All right. No questions. Then we will move on to talking about the candidates for the Republican primary runoff. Like I said, we're going to start talking about Republicans first because they are the most fun to talk about because they are insane. But it's fine. It's going to be fine. It's fun to talk about tonight. It's less fun whenever they are using their insane thinking in ways that actually affect people. But the biggest race that's going to be on any of our ballots in this primary runoff is the U.S. Senator race between John Cornyn and Ken Paxton. This is a very contentious race. Originally a third guy named Wesley Hunt was in this race, and so he's the one that like really split off a lot of those votes, and he was kind of a MAGA crazy guy, and Ken Paxton is definitely the MAGA crazy guy in this race now. John Cornyn is the very much more kind of establishment Republican, even though he's been trying very, very hard to portray himself as like Trump's favorite, MAGA guy. Wesley Hunt was in this race originally, and so it's hard to tell who Wesley Hunt's voters are going to go to, John Cornyn or Ken Paxton in this race. So this is a little bit of a toss-up. It was very close, and actually John Cornyn outperformed a lot of his polling for this race and ended up being the person who got the most votes in his primary, which was not expected at all. It was expected that it would go to a runoff, and here we are. After the primary, and it was announced that John Cornyn and Ken Paxton were the two candidates headed to the runoff, Donald Trump announced that, well, very soon here, I will be endorsing the candidate that I feel like is the best person for U.S. Senator. And that means that I completely expect whoever doesn't get my endorsement to just drop out of the race. I will anoint the next senator for Texas, and voters be damned. And interestingly, Ken Paxton was like, that's fine. I love you, and I can't say that I don't like you, but I will not drop out of this race if you don't endorse me. And there is some polling that suggests that Ken Paxton would still perform just fine, even if he doesn't get the Trump endorsement, because Trump is kind of a politically toxic figure right now, and is vote for the one Trump doesn't endorse, right? Noted. Trump is kind of a politically toxic figure right now. And just like you said, Radiant, a lot of people are so frustrated with Trump that they might just go vote for the person that Trump does not endorse. So who knows? Even if Trump endorses, this is still a very close race. It's hard to know who's going to win this one. But who's going to win doesn't really matter for knowing which candidate you should choose personally. Should you be a Republican voter, which statistically it's very likely that you are. Should you be a Republican voter in the state of Texas, your choice is going to be between John Cornyn and Ken Paxton. In the primary, John Cornyn got 42% of the vote, and Ken Paxton got 40.5% of the vote. Both of these candidates are running to be the next U.S. Senator for Texas. Every state in the country has two U.S. senators. Texas's two senators are, maybe that's a trap though, maybe like a political Princess Bride moment. Yeah. Inconceivable. Now you made me forget what I was saying. I thought about inconceivable. John Cornyn and Ted Cruz are our two senators for the state of Texas. John Cornyn is the incumbent. Ken Paxton was the attorney general, but is now leaving his position as attorney general and is running to be the next U.S. senator. U.S. senators, I on all these slides, I have a little blurb about what this role actually is. and what they do. U.S. senators, along with U.S. representatives, are responsible for passing federal laws and an annual budget to fund the military and federal agencies. Senators also approve or reject treaties, heads of federal departments, and federal judges, which have become increasingly important in deciding policy debates. So we have a bicameral legislation. We have a bicameral Congress, legislative body in our country. The two chambers of our Congress are the House of Representatives and the Senate. The House of Representatives has many representatives from each state, proportional to those states' populations. But then the Senate has exactly 100 senators, two from each of the 50 different states. And so John Cornyn has served as senator for a very long time, and whoever wins this race would go and represent Texas in the Senate at the federal level. So first candidate we're going to talk about is John Cornyn, because he appears first on your ballot. John Cornyn is the incumbent. He's been a senator for Texas for a long time, since 2002. He holds degrees in journalism, which I found interesting. He holds degrees in journalism and law. He started off working as a lawyer for Gross, Lock, and Hebden in San Antonio. A big law firm, I guess. He was elected in 1984 as a Bexar County district judge. That is, Bexar County is the county where San Antonio is. He was elected in 1990 to the Texas Supreme Court. Notably, in the state of Texas, we have two Supreme Courts. We have the Texas Supreme Court, and we have the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals. The Texas Supreme Court decides on legal matters. The Texas Court of Criminal Appeals hears appeals in the state of Texas. And so John Cornyn served on the Texas Supreme Court. He was elected there in 1990, but then was elected in 1998 to serve as Texas's Attorney General. That is the top legal official in the state. They are the chief law enforcement officer in the state, and they are responsible for prosecuting the laws of the state, prosecuting people who break the laws of the state. But then he was elected as U.S. Senator for Texas in 2002 and has held that position to this day. So been in the Senate for quite a while. In the Senate, he has several interesting legislative accomplishments. Some of them are accomplishments. But in the Senate, he sponsored the Open Government Act of 2007, which revised the Freedom of Information Act to ensure more timely responses to public information requests. That sounds great. Like I said, he weirdly has a degree in journalism, which I found interesting. And journalists all the time make good use of the Freedom of Information Act request to get documents from the government all the time. And sometimes certain agencies in the government will slow roll releasing some of that documentation to people who are asking for it. And so John Cornyn did a good thing by amending the FOIA Act to FOIA Act. Is that redundant? Is FOIA? Yeah, is FOIA, Freedom of Information Act. Anyways, John Cornyn amended that act to ensure more timely responses on Freedom of Information Act requests. So that's a good thing. He also co-authored the First Step Act of 2018, a bipartisan criminal justice reform law aimed at reducing recidivism and rehabilitating low-risk offenders. That also sounds like a pretty good thing for a Republican. The Senate is meant to be a more kind of like mature, like stable, bipartisan institution compared to the House. Oftentimes it is not that. But John Cornyn definitely like has had a reputation for a Republican trying to be more bipartisan. which has put him in hot water with his Republican voters a lot of times. And that is one of the chief lines of attack that Ken Paxton has been leveling against John Cornyn, is that he's a rhino because he, dares to cross the aisle to actually pass legislation. So 3/5 are good. Those last two, though, right? We're getting there. We're getting there. Don't jump ahead. In the wake of Uvalde, he was the lead GOP negotiator for the bipartisan Safer Community Acts of 2022. The bill enhanced background checks for young buyers and provided funding for mental health and school safety programs. Like I said, another kind of decent piece of legislation for a Republican. That is another one that has very much put him in some hot water with a lot of the Republican base. Right after Uvalde, there was a lot of pressure to actually do something to stop shootings from happening. And the most effective way to stop shootings from happening is put into place any kind of gun restrictions. Just any kind at all will immediately make communities more safe. We have more guns in our country than we do people. And so enhancing background checks so that people who have committed crimes can't easily acquire firearms sounds like a smart thing to me. But his Republican base has been frustrated with him for that. So maybe you're a Republican listening to this. Maybe that's relevant information. What does that say? You currently do not have an active live stream on TikTok. That's fine. I know that. I'm not meaning to stream on TikTok. Don't scare me like that. This year, he reduced the Sanctuary City Elimination Act of 2026, which aims to overrule local sanctuary city policies and force local police departments to cooperate with ICE. Yay. This is a hot button issue right now because Houston, and see, I'm a part of the Houston DSA. I go to protests all the time with the Houston DSA in Houston, and one of the regular protests that I haven't been able to get to because they do it on weeknights, and I can't make it all the way to Houston on a Tuesday night. But one of the protests they've been doing a lot recently here is protesting at city council meetings, advocating for city council to pass legislation that restricts the Houston Police Department's cooperation with ICE. And because of the pressure that the Houston DSA, among other organizations, have been putting on city council, a couple of city council members actually got together and put together an ordinance to tell HPD that they're not allowed to hold people who have civil immigration warrants. They're not allowed to detain them for ICE to come and pick them up and deport them. What's been happening right now is HPD, they pull somebody over for a taillight being out. They run their plates. They see that they have a civil immigration warrant out for them. They call ICE and say, "Hey, you better get over here. I've got an illegal for you." And then they detain that person, put them in the back of the squad car or whatever, and wait for ICE to arrive and hand them over to ICE, and then they get deported. However, a civil federal immigration warrant is not something that you're able to arrest people for. You're not able to be arrested for a civil immigration warrant like that. And so it is a violation of their Fourth Amendment rights. It's also a violation of their Fourth Amendment rights for local police departments to enforce federal warrants like that. And so the city of Houston made an ordinance that said HPD is not allowed to detain people and then wait for ICE to come and take them away. And Greg Abbott got real ticked off of that and said, "I'm going to withhold $200 million in state grants to the city of Houston. I'm going to withhold hundreds of millions of dollars in funding if you don't repeal this amendment right now." And John Whitmire, the gross, disgusting, fake establishment Democrat that John Whitmire is, was like, oh, guys, we're going to lose all this funding. We have to revoke this ordinance right now. And everybody was like, no, like the local city council not only put this forward, but then approved it by a majority vote. We have the ability and the right to decide on how our own city is governed. The state doesn't have, can't tell us how to govern our own city. And Whitmire gave this really great quote to the Houston Chronicle where he said, well, it really doesn't matter what city council wants to do in the city of Houston. The only opinion that matters is the governor's. So I think that they already did. I can't remember. I've been focusing so much on getting this election guide put together. But I think that they already got together and amended that law, which they were going to include an amendment to the law that said that you're not allowed to hold these people and detain them, was the original ordinance. But now there's an inclusion that says that the police department can opt into a program where you're not allowed to detain those people. And of course, the Houston Police Department is not going to do that. And so it effectively is just going to nullify the entire law. So that's awesome. But anyways, that was a long tangent because John Cornyn is here also trying to pass legislation to do the same thing where cities are not able to pass local ordinances to restrict ICE activities in their city. He also has supported and voted. He also has supported and voted for the SAVE Act, which is horrific, which restricts voting rights, requiring a passport or certified birth certificate as proof of citizenship to register to vote, which is insane. There has been all kind of advocacy groups talking about how this is just going to immediately disenfranchise millions of women across the country if the SAVE Act actually passes. It will immediately disenfranchise millions of women across the country who are married and their name on their driver's license now does not match the name on their birth certificate any longer. Because those don't match, they can't use their birth certificate as proof of citizenship. And it takes months to get a passport. So it's going to create a tremendous hurdle for people being able to go out and vote. And many advocacy groups have brought this up to Republican legislators who are writing the SAVE Act. And those Republican legislators have just neglected to amend the act to prevent these women from being disenfranchised. On top of that, it's just going to disenfranchise, millions of people all over the country who don't feel like paying the $60+ and waiting months to get a passport in order to demonstrate. Like, if you don't have a birth certificate, then you have to pay. I don't know where my birth certificate is right now. I'm pretty sure my parents have it at their house, but I have a passport so that I'll be fine, but I paid $60 for that passport. We have a constitutionally protected right to be able to vote. Now we have to pay $60 to get a passport. It's ridiculous. All in the name of election security to prevent voter fraud, which in the state of Texas, there was less than 10 cases of documented, not 10 million, not 10,000, not 1,000, which is 1,000. 10, less than 10 cases of voter fraud since the 2024 presidential election. What's interesting is this isn't even the first time they've tried passing this bill / a bill like this. Yes, they've tried to push the SAVE Act through a couple of times, and Republicans are voting against it because it is just horrific legislation that is going to, like I said, disenfranchise millions of people from being able to vote. But that's always the name of the game for Republicans. They're always looking to restrict voting as much as they possibly can. We're going to scoot over just a little bit. There we go. They're always looking to restrict voting as much as they possibly can. And so John Cornyn has supported and voted for the SAVE Act. That is... Maybe that's your thing. Maybe you're like, oh man, all these illegals are voting and it's just messing up the elections. Maybe that's your thing. Maybe you like John Cornyn for that. So But if that is your thing, then I very much think that you would be voting for Ken Paxton and not for John Cornyn, because he would be a rhino from. Anyways, we have a slide on the people who have controversies and scandals. We have a controversy and scandal slide. And John Cornyn is pretty squeaky clean, except for the fact that he took more than $2 million from AIPAC and the pro-Israel lobby. You can see some of the highlights from his campaign website for what his priorities are, and one of them is to support the state of Israel. I wonder why that happens to be one of his priorities on his campaign website. I don't know. It probably doesn't have anything with the $2 million that he got from the Israel lobby. It's nuts. There's a population of males who dream of getting rid of the 19th Amendment. Yeah, that's fine. E.g. Doug Wilson. Doug Wilson is nuts. Did you see him get absolutely roasted on Piers Morgan? Go look that up. Doug Wilson on Piers Morgan. Anyways. Some of the highlights from John Cornyn's campaign website include his intent to, and these are in order as they appear on the website. First and foremost, support the Trump administration's agenda, and you're going to see a lot of these bullet points get repeated on all these Republican candidates' websites, because they're just copy and paste. They're exactly the same. They all want to, screw over immigrants and suck Donald Trump's wiener. So it's very difficult to distinguish between like I don't understand Republican voters. Like, every Republican candidate is exactly the same. The way that you differentiate them is by how crazy they've been in like the public sphere. Like, you can differentiate John Cornyn from Ken Paxton because Ken Paxton has been nutty, like gone sicko mode on like prosecuting pro-Palestinian protesters and prosecuting illegal immigrants and prosecuting other states for election fraud in the 2020 election. Like, Ken Paxton because he's marketed himself by being insane. And so really the way that like Republican voters, I think, decide between Republican candidates, because it's done on their policies are all like completely identical. The way that Republicans differentiate between Republican candidates is just by like vibes, like how well this person has marketed themselves. So, and which means I think Ken Paxton is winning this. It's fear. But they all do that. They all push the fear button. So I don't know. I guess it's whichever one hits the fear button the hardest. Anyways, number one priority for John Cornyn and for basically every single Republican candidate that we're going to talk about is support the Trump administration's agenda. And then it is support and increase enforcement against undocumented immigrants and restrict future immigration. That's obviously not the way that he words it on his website. I've taken the liberty of rewording it slightly to make it a little bit more honest, because like the average Republican will hear those words and might chafe at like, oh, well, yeah, but we don't want to restrict. We want illegals to come here the right way. No, you don't. They might kind of chafe at that, but like the average Republican is going to hear John Cornyn is a very wet fart. We're about to start talking about Ken Paxton, though. So most Republicans are going to hear that line and kind of agree with it anyways. So I've taken some of their, like I said, this is not the way that he words it, but I've reworded it slightly to make it a little bit more honest. His number two priority is support and increase enforcement against undocumented immigrants and restrict future immigration, and then restrict Americans' access to reproductive health care. Again, not the way that he's going to phrase it. Restrict future immigration, like European ancestry only. But I think that most conservatives are kind of Ken Paxton is a brand new STD. I think most Republicans see this is still hot. Am I clipping? I feel like I'm clipping. Most Republicans are gonna be like, we want them to come in the right way, and therefore they would favor like white immigration. But even then, like I think like a lot of conservatives nowadays are like even against like any immigration whatsoever. JK, he's just plain old AIDS. So John Cornyn wants to restrict Americans' access to reproductive health care. He wants to secure Americans' access to firearms. He wants to support the state of Israel. We got to love Israel. Like I said, if you didn't see earlier, he's gotten $2 billion plus from the Israel lobby. So obviously support Israel is one of his campaign priorities. And then prioritize the interests of the Texas agricultural industry. The way that he would phrase it is like deregulate Texas farmers, cut the red tape. Is that strangling our folksy American farmers? But all it means is deregulate the Texas agricultural industry and make it more profitable. And deregulate energy corporations. So those are John Cornyn's big priorities. Ken Paxton. You're not clipping, but you are hot. Zoom, zoom, zoom. What the hell is happening? Goodness gracious. Any more jokes? Any more jokes about John Cornyn before we move on to Ken Paxton? Ken Paxton. He holds degrees in psychology, business, and law. Everyone tell Blaine how hot he is. Okay, stop that. After law school, Paxton worked at the firm Strausberger and Price, LLP, and later served as in-house counsel for the JCPenney Company. Ooh. On to Paxton Jorks. Paxton was elected in 2002 to the Texas House of Representatives for District 70 in the Dallas area. I refuse to believe he has a psychology degree. I know, right? Isn't that crazy? John Cornyn has a degree in journalism. What are these Republicans doing? I don't understand. Has a degree in psychology. Just like on the federal level, we have a bicameral Congress with a House of Representatives and a Senate. So too on the state level in Texas, we have a Texas House of Representatives and a Texas Senate. And Ken Paxton in 2002 was elected to the Texas House of Representatives. And then in 2012, he was elected to the Texas State Senate for District 8, also in the Dallas area. And then in 2014, he was elected as the Attorney General, which is the position that he holds to this day. Though a very exciting thing is he has to give up his position for Attorney General in order to pursue election for Senate. So if Ken Paxton loses this race, he's not the Attorney General anymore, which is very exciting. That is a very exciting reason for everybody to go and vote for John Cornyn in this race so that we can completely remove Ken Paxton from public office. Which Bodega Corner store is it from? His psychology degree? Ken Paxton looks like a less interesting NPC. Less interesting. Interesting. So yes, he is the Attorney General, which is the top law enforcement officer for the state of Texas, which means that he prosecutes people who break Texas law. What is happening here? Why is this not? Uh-oh. We broke it. Uh-oh. Something went wrong. Oh no, don't pay no attention. Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. We broke it. They're both awful. Yeah. Like NPCs are like, who the F is that? Is this the PAX bots? They are attacking. Good Lord, Kevin. Jesus. Okay, what is happening? Is the internet crapping out or something? Gird toured loins? You mean gird our loins? They heard you, Blaine. They no likey? Well, that'll be fine. Okay, here we go. we have been talking about Kim Paxton's background. I don't need this window to be open. And now we will move on to his legislative accomplishments, since he was Attorney General. Accomplishments. And they're not legislative accomplishments. They are legal accomplishments because, like I said, as Attorney General, he is the chief law enforcement officer in the state of Texas and is responsible for prosecuting people who break Texas law and ensuring that local district attorneys prosecute people who break Texas law. Oh, wait, it might just be nuclear war. Nuclear, that's what I said. Does that mean we'll have a winter finally? Accomplishments. I'm sorry. I mumble. In 2015, through legal challenges, he successfully killed the Obama administration's Deferred Action for Parents of Americans program, the DAPA. Did anybody call it DAPA back then? Or is it Deferred Action for Parents of Americans program, which would have prevented undocumented migrant parents from being separated from their children. This is a program that the Obama administration started. It kind of was like in line with DACA, which is Deferred Action for Child Americans. I can't remember. Child arrivals, is that what it is? So DACA right now is if you were like below the age of 5 or something, you have, or is it 18? I don't know. If you were a child and you were brought by your parents into the country illegally, you had no say in coming into the country, and therefore we're not going to prosecute you like other undocumented migrants and deport you, as mercilessly because you didn't have any control over being brought into the country. In the same way, the DAPA program, Deferred Action for Parents of Americans, was a program where if you were an undocumented migrant and you had a kid in the United States, because you had that kid in the United States, they are an American citizen. And because they are an American citizen, you don't want American citizens to be separated from their parents. We're totally fine if, children are separated from their parents, but if they're an American citizen child, then we probably shouldn't separate them from their parents. And so the Obama administration started DAPA, which would have prevented undocumented migrant parents from being separated from their U.S. citizen children. And Ken Paxton, by suing the Obama administration a lot, successfully killed that program. So, accomplishment. But if you are watching this guide and you're interested in voting for in the Republican primaries, maybe you see that as an accomplishment. In 2021, he secured $290 million. He secured a $290 million settlement from Johnson & Johnson in April 2026 over deceptive marketing of opioids. Hey, that sounds like a good thing. Johnson & Johnson marketed opioids and acted like, oh, they're fine. Just eat them like Tic Tacs. And a lot of freaking people died. And so Ken Paxton sued the drug manufacturer of those opioids and won Texans $290 million in a settlement from the company. That seems like a thing that an attorney general should be doing. In 2024 and 2025, he secured $1.4 billion settlements from Meta and Google for violating Texans' privacy rights by deceptively tracking user data. So, and like the terms and conditions, they worded it in such a way where you didn't recognize that they were doing things like listening to your phone calls and recording, what apps you opened after you left Facebook, stuff like that. And because they didn't clearly communicate exactly the ways that they were using your data, Ken Paxton sued them for $1.4 billion each. Again, that sounds like a good thing. It sounds like a decent accomplishment. A thing that an attorney general should be doing. In 2020, He led a multi-state lawsuit to overturn the 2020 presidential election results. It was ultimately unsuccessful, and the State Bar of Texas later sought to discipline him for making false claims. So that's exciting. Can you imagine if like another state tried to sue Texas to delegitimize the results of a Texas election? Ken Paxton, along with several other conservative attorneys general, sued other states to try to get their election results thrown out for being fraudulent, because election fraud, which was silly. And his case was riddled with just lies. So much so that the state bar, not like just some woke liberal state bar, the State Bar of Texas tried to discipline him for just outright lying in all of these lawsuits. But they ultimately dropped that case. He unsuccessfully sued Pfizer and Eli Lilly, which I think is now just Lilly. Like, I don't think they call it Eli Lilly anymore. Anyways, he unsuccessfully sued Pfizer and Eli Lilly for allegedly misrepresenting the efficacy of the COVID-19 vaccine, and sued Tylenol over claims linking its product to autism. You only know attorneys general because of Aaron Sorkin. Do I only know it because of that? I think that's right, probably. When is that? When does he say that? I don't remember. But that is probably right. So yeah, he tried to sue Tylenol for giving people autism. Oh, it's a newsroom? Oh, I can't remember. And tried to sue the people who make the COVID vaccine for saying that it doesn't work, which it does. And so obviously those lawsuits were unsuccessful and silly. But hey, maybe you feel like your attorney general should be using state funds to pursue unjustifiable, silly lawsuits to score points against the wokes. So maybe you like Ken Paxton. Maybe you want to vote for him. Controversies and scandals. We have 2 controversies and scandal slides for Ken Paxton because his entire tenure has been defined by controversy and scandal. People have described Ken Paxton as the most corrupt. I can't talk today. Sorry. People have described Ken Paxton as the most corrupt politician in America, which is like even in the state of Texas, he has some pretty strong contenders with like people like Christy Craddock, corrupt keeper, with people like Christy Craddock in the state of Texas. But yeah, Ken Paxton's tenure as Attorney General, he's one of the Crips, has been defined by copious controversies. In 2015, okay, I'll stop focusing on the verbal flubs on a live stream. Thank you. In 2015, he was indicted on 3 felony fraud charges for soliciting investments for a tech startup company without disclosing that he had received shares of the company's stock as compensation for recruitment. There's this tech startup. They paid him a bunch of money in the form of stocks of their company to go and recruit some of his friends to be investors in the company. He did not tell his friends that he was monetarily benefiting from recruiting them to invest in the company. And so his friends sued him. And after 10 years later, after 10 years of fighting the charges in court, the case was dismissed after Paxton paid restitution to the victims. He had to pay restitution to the victims, and he had to take like a bunch of like courses on like ethics. But he did not have to admit guilt in that case, so technically was never declared guilty of defrauding these people. Though he spent 10 years fighting it in court. It's because I love you very much. Okay, weirdo. Hey, this guy's a real jerk. In 2023, this is the real famous one. In 2023, 20 articles of impeachment were brought against Paxton for a litany of offenses, including directing the Attorney General's staff and resources to intervene in a lawsuit brought against Paxton's friend and campaign donor, Austin real estate developer Nate Paul, who paid for renovations to one of Paxton's homes in exchange for the legal intervention. Nate Paul is a real estate developer in Austin. He's being sued. He goes to his buddy Ken Paxton and says, "Hey, I'm in a real legal jam here. Can you use the Attorney General's staff and resources by our own Dade Phelan?" That's right. And Dade Phelan is no longer Speaker of the House because Republicans never forgave him for just doing objectively the right thing in this situation. Nate Paul is a real estate developer in Austin. He's in some real legal trouble. He goes to his buddy Ken Paxton and says, "Hey, can you use the legal resources of the Attorney General's office to help me get out of this legal jam? And in exchange, I will do renovations on your one of your homes." And Ken Paxton said, "Yeah, sure thing, buddy. I know that you contributed thousands of dollars to my campaign, so I owe you, right?" So yeah, he directed the AG staff to intervene in this lawsuit. He was also indicted for interfering with the Attorney General office's handling of public records requests related to a criminal investigation into Paul. So these streams should be more popular. Listen to this beautiful boy. Okay. He interfered. So there was a criminal investigation into Nate Paul because Nate Paul is a horrific criminal, and the people doing the criminal investigation had public records requests in the furtherance of their criminal investigation. And Ken Paxton, because the Attorney General's office handles those public records requests, Ken Paxton told people who worked in the Attorney General's office, "Hey, kind of slow roll and even like kind of don't give over the documents that they're asking for." Oh, have you seen the clip? We're kind of focusing on something else right now, Kevin. And I have not seen the Clayface trailer, but I would be down to watch it. Never mind, save it for the pod. Oh yeah, we can live react on the pod. That'll be fun. He interfered in this criminal investigation, and he fired attorneys. Somebody just walked into my house, I think. Oh, well, hopefully I'm not dead soon. He also fired Attorney General office employees who came forward with this information revealing Paxton's corrupt relationship with Ron, save yourself. Paxton's corrupt relationship with Paul. So there were several whistleblowers who blew the whistle on the fact that all of this was happening behind the scenes. And Ken Paxton directed people in his staff to I'm yelling at the movie. Directed people in his staff to be jerks to the people who whistle blew, and he fired some of them. He just made their lives miserable, and so they eventually sued him. We'll talk about that in a minute. But one of the things that he was also impeached for was it's anarchy. One of the things he was also impeached for was firing these employees. Unfortunately, not a single article of impeachment received the 21 votes required for conviction, and Paxton was fully acquitted and immediately returned to office. So, also, let's do an anarchy. Do an anarchy. What does that mean? So, yes, technically, I guess none of these, he was acquitted of all of these crimes. So he's not guilty of them. But yeah, there's also some other insane details we're going to talk about. Went too far. About those crimes in 2020. So this is after he was impeached. 8 senior employees of the Attorney General's office took the extraordinary step of reporting Paxton to the FBI. Oh, wait, was this before or after? Yeah. No, this is before. So this is before he got impeached. This is part of the reason. This was the actual whistleblowing that happened. Employees of Ken Paxton's office saw that he was doing all of this insane criminal behavior. And so they reported him, as one should, to the FBI, alleging bribery, abuse of office, and other misconduct related to Ken Paxton's dealings with real estate developer Nate Paul. They alleged that Paxton had improperly pressured agency employees to intervene in legal disputes to benefit Paul and his businesses. In return, Paul helped fund renovations to Paxton's home and employed a woman with whom Paxton was having an extramarital affair, which is so crazy because one of the senators, this has to go to the Texas Senate in order for them to vote on these articles of impeachment. And one of the senators in the Texas Senate that has to listen to all of this evidence brought forward for why Ken Paxton should be impeached is Ken Paxton's wife. Listening to the details about how he got Nate Paul to hire like his mistress. Crazy. And afterwards, they got divorced. And it was real messy, apparently. Following the FBI report, the whistleblowers were either fired or forced out of the agency, which led to them suing Ken Paxton. In 2025, this is after he was impeached, a judge awarded the whistleblowers $6.6 million, this is going to be insane. In 2025, a judge awarded these whistleblowers $6.6 million after finding that Paxton had violated the Texas Whistleblower Act. The Texas Attorney General's office is ultimately responsible, not Ken Paxton out of his own money. The Texas Attorney General's office, the taxpayer-funded Texas Attorney General's office now, is on the hook for Ken Paxton's improper abuse of these employees that he was found guilty of. The Attorney General's office is found is on the hook for that, and so is ultimately responsible for paying the restitution $6.6 million with taxpayer funds. Crazy. That means, let's do an anarchy. That means tear these fascists down. That's a Woody Guthrie song. Is Nate Paul related to the Paul brothers? I don't think so. That'll make the masses care about it. He's divorced from his wife, but not from the politics office. Yeah, apparently not. So yeah, Ken Paxton, man. That's Ken Paxton. That's what Ken Paxton has been up to in his almost 10 years. Oh, more than 10 years in the Texas Attorney General's office. Now he is running for U.S. Senator. He wants to replace John Cornyn as U.S. Senator. And these are some of the highlights from his website. He makes Johnny look relatively decent. Johnny? Who's Johnny? Oh, John Cornyn. Yeah, anybody next to Ken Paxton looks decent, except for the Republican voters, man. Republicans voters are like, oh, wait, you're doing crimes? Let me vote for you harder, please. Republican voters love voting for criminals. They're like the law and order. Like, we gotta, make people follow the law. We gotta freaking kill people because they're disobeying the law. But you can commit some crimes and you run for public office. Republican voters are coming out in mass for you. Why can't I see all the comments, Blaine? You can. They're all over there. Or over there. They're over there. I can't see Matt's comment. Guess you can. It's right there on the screen. I can see it. He makes Johnny look relatively decent. Relatively. Maybe you're blind. Do you have your glasses on? Highlights from his campaign website include his intent to stop and fix my personal issue. Not in my chat box. I don't know how to tell. I don't know how to fix that. His chats are in my chat box. I don't know how to help you with that. Highlights from his campaign website include his intent to, number one, first and foremost, I'll let you guess, support the Trump administration's agenda. Every single one of these Republican candidates, like I said, a lot of these bullet points are going to sound familiar. Support the Trump administration's agenda, fight corruption in Washington, and put working class interests first. I tried to support and increase enforcement against undocumented immigrants and restrict future immigration. Fight for conservative principles, including securing Americans' access to firearms, restricting Americans' access to reproductive health care, and fighting the radical transgender movement in sports and schools. I put all those in the same bullet point because those are all one bullet point on his website. One of his points that is interesting is stop sending billions to other countries and put America first. American first politics are a very kind of like Republican policy, but a lot of these candidates don't include that on their websites, except for like Paxton is one of the few that like explicitly says don't send money to other countries. And whenever I read that, I pretty immediately like read that as like he's coming out as like the kind of anti-Israel, because nobody likes Israel. Like everybody hates Israel on the left and the right. Like it is Israel is more unpopular than it is popular in both parties. And I know that that's the case for Democrats. I'm almost positive that's the case for Republicans. At the very least, they are tremendously unpopular with Republicans. And so it feels like Ken Paxton was trying to come out as like the anti-Israel candidate here. He doesn't have anything about, jorking Israel's penis on his website, but he also explicitly says stop sending billions to other countries. He could also be talking about Ukraine, or is probably talking about both of them. How does one fight corruption with corruption? Is it supposed to cancel out somehow? Yeah, that's why I included that bullet point specifically from his website, because I thought that was funny. And then his last one here is cut government spending, reduce the national debt, cut taxes, reduce the national debt, but we're going to cut taxes at the same time and deregulate energy corporations. They love doing that. The American first is a snub to European allies, Japan, etc. True, but I also just think it's, your regular old xenophobia. But yeah, those are your two candidates for United States Senator on the Republican primary runoff ballot. John Cornyn and Ken Paxton. Any questions about John Cornyn and Ken Paxton before we move on to the Texas Attorney General? Okay, moving on. Here we go. Good Lord. All hail the Queen of Slime, the Queen of Filth. I need a third option. Who you got? There's only two options. That's the whole point of a primary runoff. The next primary runoff on the Republican primary runoff ballot is Texas Attorney General. As I said before, Texas Attorney General is the chief law enforcement officer in the state. The two candidates running to replace Ken Paxton, because he will have to leave the Attorney General's office in order to run for the Senate. And so if he loses that race, he's out of public office, which is very exciting. But the two candidates for Texas Attorney General are MAGA Mays Middleton, which is the way that he has branded himself on all of his campaign material, because notably he does not have the Trump endorsement in this race. Neither candidate has the Trump endorsement, but basically for Republicans, if you have the Trump endorsement, you win the race. It's like the win button. And so because neither candidate has the Trump endorsement, they both try to kind of act like Trump loves me so much. And so pretty much every time you see Mays Middleton's name on his like ads or his campaign materials, he's listed himself as MAGA Mays Middleton. And very scarily, Chip Roy is kind of the establishment, more level-headed pick in this race. And he definitely did not get the majority of the vote in this race. Mays Middleton, I cannot say his last name. Mays Middleton got 39.1% of the vote in the primary, and Chip Roy only got 31.6% of the vote. The Texas Attorney General is the top lawyer in Texas representing or defending the state in mostly civil litigation. The Attorney General can bring forward or participate in lawsuits against the federal government, corporations, or others on behalf of the public, as Paxton, in his time as Attorney General, has done over immigration and abortion policies. The Attorney General can also make legal interpretations and issue opinions on legal questions. Margaret Magasterson. Okay. Chips Ahoy. Yeah. Chips Ahoy. Yes. Vote for Chip. Yeah, that's a scary thing to say in this race, because Chip Roy is also insane. But the first person that's going to appear on your ballot is Mays Middleton. Chip Roy missed campaign opportunity. Okay. A little bit of personal info on Mays Middleton. He holds degrees in finance and in law. He is the only candidate, the two candidates for the Democrats who are running for Attorney General as well. They also went to a runoff. So we'll talk about the Democratic candidates for Attorney General as well. But of the four candidates, oh man. Hold on. Of the four candidates, will you be sharing the candidates' penis sizes? I don't have access to that information. Unfortunately, I think that would be a pretty, decisive factor for a lot of Republican voters, but I don't have access to that information. Not for this election. That has been a thing that we've had access to for some elections, but not this one. Out of all of the candidates for Attorney General, Mays Middleton is the only candidate that has no legal experience whatsoever. And he's running to be the top law enforcement officer for the state of Texas. He is currently the president of Middleton Oil Company. Ooh. He also owns ranching, cattle, and agriculture businesses, and serves on the board of First Liberty Financial Bank. So big money guy, big, oil, petrochemical, agriculture industry guy. At the ripe old age of, what is he like? In his late 20s, young, like babyface. He was elected in 2019 to the Texas House of Representatives, and we're going to see some of his legislative accomplishments. Because, like I said, Chip Roy is kind of the more level-headed character in this race, just barely. He was elected in 2019 to the Texas House of Representatives for District 23 in the Galveston area, right in our neck of the woods. And then he was elected in 2022 to the Texas State Senate for District 11, also in the Galveston area, the position that he holds to this day. I'm guessing mostly below average. Not circus small, but small enough to make them this ridiculous. Just check out their trucks. Going for AG with no legal experience. Yeah. That's fine. I guess he has a degree in law, but he has never like exercised that degree in a legal capacity that I could find. So maybe there's something I missed. During his time in the Texas Senate, he authored the Save Women's Sports Act in 2023, prohibiting transgender women from competing in women's collegiate sports. That feels like a really important issue in the state of Texas. What are there, like 6 trans athletes in a state of tens of millions of people? If that, how many trans athletes are in the state of Texas? How many trans athletes in Texas? There is no quick singular number answer, but it has to be less than 10. So yeah, Save Women's Sports Act. Save Women's Sports Act. He also authored SB 11 in 2025, allowing public school districts to adopt policies providing a daily period for student and staff prayer and religious study. I wonder how many like Muslim groups they're allowing to do Quranic studies in Texas public schools. Less than 10 in the whole country. Is it less than 10 in the whole country? So definitely less than 10 in Texas. He also authored, transgender on the brain for this guy. He also authored the transgender bathroom bill in 2025, mandating that multi-use bathrooms in certain public buildings be used according to a person's biological sex as indicated on their birth certificate. So if you're going to the bathroom in the state capitol, better bring your birth certificate with you so you can prove what your sex is. You know, God forbid you happen to look a little androgynous. We had a moment of silence in the early part of the day, and dear, drop everything and read class. SB 11 seems absolutely irrelevant. NCAA stats, can't find more than 10 in the whole country. That's crazy. When I was in school. Yeah. It is kind of nuts, but those have been his and I looked through his legislative accomplishments. There's nothing. I'm going to pee in his private sink. Sink pissing. That's a thing. There is nothing substantial in his legislative record besides a lot of these insane performative bills. Controversies and scandals. Republican Twitter profiles are just a treasure trove of insane things. I identify as a sink pisser. That's fine as long as you're doing it in your own sink, I think. In 2025, when Democratic leader of the Texas House of Representatives, Gene Wu, broke quorum by leaving the state to resist the passage of Trump's gerrymandering redistricting bill, Middleton tweeted, "Is Gene Wu back in China? And if he wants a refresher course on Marxism, I'm sure the CCP will have him back. I'll keep defending the big, beautiful map. No apologies." Gene Wu and his family immigrated to the United States from China when Wu was 5 years old. So yeah, that's a little nuts. He got in some hot water for tweeting, "Is Gene Wu back in China?" And so after he got in a little bit of hot water for that, he doubled down, being like, "If Gene Wu wants a refresher in Marxism, the CCP will give him one, I'm sure." Fucking nerd. And some highlights from Mays Middleton's campaign website are also insane. Number one agenda for Mays Middleton is support and increase enforcement against undocumented immigrants and restrict future immigration, xenophobia and racism. Yeah. Resist Americans' access to reproductive health care, increase bonds, and rein in local district attorneys who refuse to enforce the law. Fight the woke left's radical gender agenda in sports and schools, increase enforcement of election laws and voter restrictions, because that's a big problem in Texas. Doge Texas, which that sounds awesome. Hey, this guy's a real jerk. By working to decrease government spending and investigating government fraud. Yeah, that sounds like a real giant problem in the state of Texas and something that the Attorney General's office should be prioritizing. And the last of his policy priorities is sue corporations for deceptive trade practices and also resist foreign investment in Texas. So that's exciting. Those are his main priorities. Moving on to Chip Roy, the just slightly more level-headed candidate in this race. Chip Roy holds a degree in law. He worked in finance for the Bank of America before going to law school. After law school, he worked on Senator John Cornyn's staff from 2002 to 2010, so for a good while, worked with John Cornyn. From 2010 to 2012, he served as Special Assistant U.S. Attorney in the Eastern District of Texas. Is his brother Dale Roy? I don't know. I don't know who Dale Roy is. He was hired as Senator Ted Cruz's Chief of Staff in 2012. And then from 2014 to 2016, he served as First Assistant Attorney General of Texas under Attorney General Ken Paxton. So if you like Ken Paxton, you probably like Chip Roy. He was elected in 2018 to the United States House of Representatives for District 21 in the Fredericksburg area. And that is the position that he holds to this day. Some of his accomplishments while in the House of Representatives has been co-sponsoring the Highway Formula Fairness Act in 2025 to ensure that states with high population growth, like Texas, receive a greater share of federal highway trust fund dollars, which I don't know how big of an issue that is, but he's bringing home money for the state, so that seems like a good thing. He also introduced the Career Criminal Accountability Act in 2026, which would create a points-based system for enhanced sentencing of repeat violent offenders. Okay. And he also supported and voted for the SAVE Act, which restricts voting rights requiring a passport or birth certificate for proof of citizenship to register to vote. So that also seems like a not great thing to be supporting. He also just recently has made headlines. He's campaigning, so he's putting forward, play KSP. We're doing politics heroics. We can't play KSP tonight. But we are playing KSP tomorrow night. So tune in tomorrow night. And heroics, not too bad. Heroics is in Michigan. And your primary is coming up in August, Heroics, and you need to go vote for Abdul Al-Sayed. You better write that down. Set an alarm for August 1st. I don't know when the election is. It's sometime in August. And go vote for Abdul Al-Sayed. Leave the whole ballot blank if you only vote for Abdul, because he is a great candidate in Michigan. Only if you play KSP right now, honestly, getting just one person in Michigan to go vote for Abdul will probably be more politically impactful than this voter guide. but I'm going to keep on doing the voter guide. Nice try, though, heroics. Anyways, Chip Roy also is running for office right now. And so he's trying to like make news, which he has successfully done by authoring and introducing this bill called the Mamdani Act in Congress, which would take citizens who either have immigrated to the United States or been naturalized as U.S. citizens. GG. All right. I'm going to go to bed. All right. See you later, heroics. Would take immigrants to the U.S. or immigrants who have been naturalized to be U.S. citizens, and would revoke their citizenship if they advocate for socialism in America. So that's crazy. Talk about McCarthy era. We'll see if it actually passes. Republicans control both the House and Senate. Rage, W Stream. Hey, Rage, how you doing, buddy? Thank you for Wing the stream. Wait, he named it after the New York City mayor. Yes, and it's like an insane acronym too. Hold on, how did he get it? I can't remember. It stands for Measures Against Marxism's Dangerous Adherence and Noxious Measures against Mamdani Measures Against Marxism's Dangerous Adherence and Noxious Islamists Act. But yeah, it's named after the New York City mayor because the New York City mayor is just an avowed democratic socialist and is doing awesome things in New York City. It makes me want to move to New York because it's the only area in the country that seems to actually be like progressing. That's fine. I mean, it's fine to disagree with the guy, but when WTF, so much fear. Yeah, that's fine. So that's Chip Roy. Controversies and scandals for Chip Roy. He tweeted just the 3 words, "No more Muslims," back in April. Analysis from the Washington Post found Roy had posted about Muslims, Islam, or Sharia law more than 244 times since January. That Washington Post article was posted earlier this month in April, which is insane. 244 times just this year. So like radical Islam, which less than 2% of the population of Texas is Muslim. And so for Chip Roy to be so worried about radical Islamists in the state of Texas is ludicrous. But yeah, tweeted about it 244 times since January. When asked about the comments, he said, stopping the flood of Islamists into Texas would be his fundamental mission as Attorney General. His fundamental mission is prosecuting less than 2% of the Texas population, which is like ridiculous to even say. I'm just saying what Chip Roy means is Muslims, but he's talking about the flood of Islamists, which would be no one. No one in Texas is a radical Islamist. But yeah, go ahead and let's devote millions of dollars of Attorney General's office funds towards finding the radical Islamists to stop the count. Hey, Paul. That would be his fundamental mission as Attorney General. He said, the advance of Islam is destroying the state and vowed to defend what he called Judeo-Christian culture in Texas, so white people, accusing Muslim organizations of plotting to turn the West into an Islamic state. Jesus Christ. And like I said, Chip Roy, I don't know, it's pretty close. But I think Chip Roy is very slightly the kind of more level-headed actor in this race. How about fundamental mission be taking care of your people. Yeah. Politicians are destroying the state. Yeah, it's probably fine. He also has taken more than $300,000 from AIPAC. So, and this is what's so interesting is there was this big study that came out from Dropside News got their hands on a report that was given to Israel's Foreign Ministry Office, because Israel's Foreign Ministry Office petitioned a U.S. analytics, like political analysis company, to poll people and figure out what would be the most effective way for Israel to advocate for itself in America. Go read this Dropsite News report because it's really great. Chippy is definitely better than MMM, which is fun. Yeah. Go read this report because it's great, from Dropsite News about Israel's Foreign Ministry Office contracting this report. And in the report, they recommend to Israel's Foreign Ministry Office that Israel is so radically unpopular in the United States now that you will not gain a tremendous amount of support for Israel by being like, look how awesome Israel is. Nobody believes that anymore. Israel has killed so many tens of thousands of people, has dislocated. What do you call that? I don't know. Has run out of their land millions of people in the region. Like, Israel is just a psychotic, insane actor in the region. Got us into this whole freaking war with Iran. And so understandably, Israel is tremendously unpopular in the United States. And so this think tank, this like analysis company, told Israel's Foreign Ministry Office, don't advocate for Israel in the United States in order to accrue support for Israel. The most effective way of securing support for Israel is actually to make Americans really afraid of Muslims. Talk about how scary Islam is, and talk about how scary Muslims are in the United States. And then, because Israel is the only state in the Middle East that's fighting against radical Islam, if you successfully stoke a lot of fear of Muslims in the United States, they will Americans will reluctantly kind of support Israel because they're attacking the Muslims. And so it just is a weird coincidence to me. We've seen like Islamophobic rhetoric get dialed up to like 11 in these races all over the state. And Chip Roy is a big manifestation of that. And it's just intriguing to me that candidates that are getting hundreds of thousands of dollars from Israel are the most vocal about how scary Muslims are. I don't know for sure that there's a connection there, but it's awfully suspicious to me. I don't live in Texas, but the politics are entertaining. I got to say, thank you. Appreciate that waffle. But yeah, unfortunately, if you don't live in Texas, this might not be super applicable to you. But it is always entertaining talking about Republicans because they're entertaining until they get into power, and then it's less entertaining, whatever they're enacting their insane policies. Okay. Chip Roy's priorities, if he is elected as the Attorney General, include his intent to stand for Texas. Don't know what that means, really. Protect and support law enforcement. Rein in activist judges and district attorneys. Not entirely sure what that means. Support and increase enforcement against undocumented immigrants and restrict future immigration. Increase enforcement of election laws and voter restrictions. Fight the woke agenda in sports and schools. Fight for Americans' access to firearms. Deregulate the healthcare industry. Fight against vaccine mandates. Jesus. Restrict Americans' access to reproductive health care. And fight for an investment from Marxists, Islamists, and the Communist Party. That's a real problem here in the state of Texas. So those are Chip Roy's priorities. Like I said, with a lot of these Republican candidates, some of these are going to sound familiar. And that is the race for Texas Attorney General between Mays Middleton and Chip Roy. Any questions about the race for Attorney General before we move on to what am I moving on to after this? Oh God, the race for Railroad Commissioner with Beau French. Beau French is psychotic. Oh my God, it's gonna. You talk about entertaining. Just wait a couple seconds. If there are no questions in the chat, we will move on to the Texas Railroad Commission. The two candidates for Texas Railroad Commissioner are Jim Wright, who is the incumbent, and Beau French, who is an interesting character. And very scarily, this race was very close here. Jim Wright just barely got the most votes in this race with 32.1% of the vote. And Beau French came in second place with 31.7% of the vote. Because neither candidate got the majority of the votes, they're going to a runoff just between those two candidates. And the Texas Railroad Commissioner, if you weren't aware, has nothing to do with railroads in the state of Texas. It has everything to do with regulating and overseeing adherence to regulations of the Texas oil and gas industry. I got to sleep, so I don't get a sticker. Happy yearbook stream, a sticker. Oh, so I don't get sicker. Didn't read that right. Oh no, you're sick. Sorry, Radiant. Yeah. See you later, buddy. Happy yearbook stream. I don't know what a yearbook stream is, but okay. Thank you. The Railroad Commission has nothing to do with railroads, oversees the oil and gas industry. In Texas, the Railroad Commission regulates oil and gas production, including drilling permits and waste disposal through underground wells. It was originally established to regulate railroad tariffs, hence the name, but railroads are now overseen by a division of the Texas Department of Transportation. Members of the three-person board are elected statewide, and so of the three members of the Texas Railroad Commission, this is the one that we are voting on in the primary runoff. Jim Wright is the incumbent. He's been serving as the Texas Railroad Commissioner, but Beau French is going to appear first on your ballot. So we're going to talk about Beau French first. And boy, howdy, Beau French. Goodness gracious. A little bit of background about Beau French. He co-founded and served as chief operating officer for two hedge fund management firms in Fort Worth, Verity Capital Partners and Trugent. I think is how you say that. Trugent. And Trugent Capital. Trugent had approximately $36.2 million in regulatory assets under management as of 2025. So big hedge funds. Again, like this is such a pattern, is like these ridiculous rich people are always the people that are going and running for office in Republican races. In 2010, he co-founded Craft International, which is a tactical training company for law enforcement and for the military. They like go and they teach. What's that all about? You mean the fact that so many Republicans are rich people? Yeah, what is all that about? He co-founded Craft International, which goes to like they get contracts with like police departments to train them with like military tactics. And he co-founded that company with famous Navy SEAL Chris Kyle, which is crazy. In 2016, he ran for the Texas House of Representatives for District 99 in the Dallas area, but he lost in the primaries. So he's never held public political office, but he was elected in 2023 as the chairman for the Tarrant County GOP. So the Tarrant County Republican Party, he is the leader of that organization. So I have a couple of his accomplishments as chair of the Tarrant County Republican Party. the main accomplishment that I could find of his as chair of the Tarrant County GOP was that he says that he helped Trump win Tarrant County, which how much help Republicans need in Tarrant County, I don't know. And that he helped flip a constable seat. Those are his claims. So who knows how true that is? But then we have Beau French is another candidate for which we have 2 controversies and scandals pages because, like I said, his Republican Twitter profiles are just treasure troves of the most psychotic rambling you've ever seen. But before we get to his tweets, he got into the hot water with this whole company that he founded with Chris Kyle, where after Chris Kyle's death, which I didn't know that Chris Kyle died. He got killed. Chris Kyle was killed by a guy who was not just schizophrenic, in the hyperbolic sense, a literal guy who was literally schizophrenic. He got killed by this guy at the shooting range because his plan would to hang out with this guy who's schizophrenic, who's not on his medication, is to take him to shoot firearms. In what world do you take an unmedicated schizophrenic to go shoot things? And he shot Chris Kyle. That's how Chris Kyle died. Which I didn't know he was dead, but he's dead. After Chris Kyle's death, Kyle's widow sued French in 2013 for allegedly conspiring to steal Kraft International, that company that trains police departments in military tactics, for allegedly conspiring to steal Kraft International and for manipulating Kraft's stock. Those were her allegations. The lawsuit was dropped after French settled and agreed to stop using Kyle's name or likeness. However, in 2016, during his campaign for Texas House, Kyle's widow sent French a cease and desist for using Chris Kyle's name and likeness in campaign materials, which was the thing that he promised that he wouldn't do anymore. But yeah, it put on there Chris Kyle loves me or whatever. So that's crazy. But more insane are his tweets. So in 2025, he ran a poll on Twitter asking his followers, who is the bigger threat to America? Jews or Muslims? Jesus Christ. By the way, the results of that poll of Beau French's followers was 24% Jews and 76% Muslims. And he put out this poll, got tremendous backlash for this poll, which led to the Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick coming out and calling for his resignation as Tarrant County GOP chair, which you've got to be a special kind of evil for Satan himself, Dan Patrick, to come out and be like, whoa, this guy's gone too far. That's crazy. Yeah. Who's the bigger threat to America, Jews or Muslims? Wild. In January 2026, he tweeted, the America First position is 1, remove third world. I'm not going to read this word because it's an adaptation of a slur. Remove third world blank from America. 2, hang, repeat, violent offenders. That's it. Awesome. Also in January 2026, he tweeted, there are 100 million foreigners, not illegal immigrants, not undocumented migrants, 100 million foreigners in this country who shouldn't be here. If they won't leave willingly, we need an army to round them up and boot them out. This is the main issue I voted for. That's very Nazi-like. He also, oh my God, this tweet is so insane. He also, referring to the ICE murder of Alex Peretti, a user on Twitter, so not Beau French, just a random person, referring to the ICE murder of Alex Peretti, this user on Twitter posted, Let me quantify my position on the dude shot by ICE today. This was the day that Alex Peretti was killed. I don't care if he was disarmed first. I don't care if he was armed at all. He sided with the invaders. He betrayed his tribe and people. Execution is morally justified. This is where the average Republican is in our country right now. In response, Beau French retweeted this guy, quote tweeted this guy with the caption, "This goes hard." Yeah, Alex Peretti is a race traitor who sided with invaders and betrayed his tribe, and his execution was morally justified. I don't know, man. Maybe you're part of the insane, less than 20% of the population that hears that kind of thing and is like, "Oh yeah, brother." But for the average person in the world, that is crazy gross. That's super smelly. Who agrees with this? Ugh. But yeah, that's how the average, maybe not the average, but that's how you have Republican candidates who are getting more than 30% of the vote. That's how you have them campaigning for themselves. He also, alongside an image of American Indian activists giving the finger to Mount Rushmore, French tweeted, "Since we," oh my God. So he posts a picture that he took. I don't think that he took it. He just found it on the internet of American Indian activists who, if you don't know the story of the theft of the Black Hills, which is where Mount Rushmore is carved, if you don't know the story of the theft of the Black Hills from the Lakotas, I'm almost positive the Lakotas are the tribe that revered the Black Hills as a sacred religious site. If you don't know the story of the violent theft of the Black Hills from American Indian tribes in our country, go give that a Google because it's horrific. And so it's very understandable that American Indian activists would be giving the finger to Mount Rushmore. But Beau French tweets a picture of American Indian activists giving the finger to Mount Rushmore and says, "Since we are going to denaturalize and deport all third world savages who hate our country, I am calling for adding these third world savages," referring to the people in the picture, "who we conquered, then bizarrely let have a nation inside our nation. I'm calling for adding these people to the list." We're going to denaturalize and deport American Indians? We let them have a nation inside our nation? In what world? How skewed does your understanding of reality have to be to be able to think about American Indians as third world savages, as if they are some foreign, we are the foreign invaders, quote unquote, to borrow language from other people that Beau French is tweeting. And then last but certainly not least, and certainly not last, because Beau French's, these are just the highlights from Beau French's Twitter page. But the last one that we're going to talk about is another tweet where he said, in the midst of the 2025 federal shutdown, he declared that the day SNAP benefits were set to expire, he declared as National Chimp Out Day, which I don't really know what that means, but it sounds like that's just hella racist, right? That sounds like one of the most racist things you can say on this platform. He declared the day that SNAP benefits were set to expire as National Chimp Out Day. And then when critics criticized the comment as racist, which it is, French accused them of being the real racists for thinking he was referring to black people. If this is not referring to black people, what? Yeah, exactly. If this is not referring to black people, who is it? What does Chimp Out Day mean? What does that mean? I don't know. Wild. So those are some highlights from Beau French's career as a politician in our country. Some highlights from his campaign website include his intent to deregulate energy corporations as a candidate for a railroad commission whose entire job is to enforce regulations upon energy corporations in the state of Texas. His number one priority listed on his website is to deregulate energy companies. Cool. We should probably just not talk about this because it's uncomfy. I'm being sarcastic. Yeah, exactly. His number one priority is to deregulate. These are listed in the same order that he lists them on his website. Deregulate energy corporations. Then, second most top priority is stop the Islamic invasion of Texas and ensure that the Texas oil and gas industry is not stolen by militant Islamists who seek to do us harm. What the hell are you talking about, dog? Your job is to regulate oil and gas companies. How does any of the less than 2% of the Texas population that is in any way Muslim, how does that apply to your role as chief regulator of the oil and gas industry in Texas? He also ends what he calls diversity, equity, and inclusion programs at the Texas Railroad Commission, because Texas Railroad Commission just so known for how woke it is. And he wants to fight foreign investment in Texas, specifically from the Chinese Communist Party. And surprise, surprise, the guy that's all about like stopping radical Islam and Islamic invasion in the state of Texas, the guy that hates Muslims, loves Israel for some reason. Push for increased cooperation between the U.S. and Israel. Dog, you are a regulatory agency. You oversee the enforcement of regulation against oil and gas industry in Texas. In what way does that involve you cooperating with the state of Israel? To any significant degree that you need to be campaigning on that. And they're so nonsensical, it's funny to even read them. His last point is ensure that the Texas Railroad Commission remains committed to pro-life, pro-family policy. The hell? And he says, Beau also recognizes that the nuclear family is the number one target of Marxists who will work to create and he, Beau French, will work to create a pro-family environment in the Railroad Commission. What the hell are you talking about, dog? What are you talking about? Yeah, Republicans are nuts. I don't understand. So crazy. So that's Beau French. He is one of the candidates for Railroad Commissioner. The other candidate for Railroad Commissioner is Jim Wright, which it's so funny. In the Republican primaries, I said this whenever we did the primary election guide, and I'm saying it again now whenever we're doing the primary runoff. With Republican candidates, your choices are between just an awful, horrible person and a despicable monster. You can choose between horrible person or despicable, inhuman monster. Those are your choices, because Beau French is the monster in this scenario. And Jim Wright is the level-headed candidate in this race, the more rational candidate in this race. And he has been a commissioner on the Texas Railroad Commission. And so, surprise, surprise, is just one of the most corrupt political officials in our state. We've already talked about Christy Craddock. Go and watch my Christy Craddock videos, because the level of corruption that Christy Craddock I don't know. Christy Craddock is horribly corrupt. I have a video explaining how insanely corrupt Christy Craddock is. There is only 3 people on the Railroad Commission, of which Christy Craddock is one, and Jim Wright is a second one. And again, surprise, surprise, one of the railroad commissioners on the Texas Railroad Commission is insanely corrupt. A little bit of personal information on Jim Wright. He starting in high school, he competed in bull riding. He was a professional bull rider, and competed in bull riding for over 20 years as a member of the Professional Rodeo Cowboy Association. During this time, he worked for a hazardous waste landfill corporation that prevented runoff from contaminating local groundwater. And leveraging that experience at that company, he started in the 90s. He founded several environmental management companies that service oil and gas operators, refineries, and utilities. So he doesn't directly own and profit from oil and gas companies themselves, but arguably more directly a conflict of interest for the Texas Railroad Commission. He owns companies that help oil and gas companies stay in compliance with regulation that is written and enforced by the Texas Railroad Commission. He was elected in 2020 to the Texas Railroad Commission, the position that he holds to this day. His personal and career history is on the Railroad Commission. This is some of his achievements. He helped to craft and voted for the commission's first overhaul of oil field waste rules in over 40 years. So that, sounds good. Environmental organizations claimed the new rules would better protect property owners and the environment by requiring companies to register the location of earthen waste pits that contain toxic drilling waste, which totally fine with dumping toxic drilling waste just in the ground. But now they have to register the location so we can at least keep track of where the toxic waste is. Though companies holding leases to drill on private property can still bury waste on site without notifying the landowner. So I don't really understand how weak were the regulations before this new overhaul, but Jim Wright overhauled these regulations. He also established and leads the Stop Theft Task Force, created in accordance with Senate Bill 494, to coordinate between law enforcement and industry corporations to curb oil field theft. One thing I didn't realize before researching Jim Wright is apparently oil field theft is like a huge issue, especially like in the Permian Basin out in West Texas, where a lot of these oil refinery sites are extremely remote, and like these thieves that it really kind of sounds like the plot for like a cool movie, where these thieves are like big high level. We're not talking about like petty crime people. We're talking about people with like heavy duty industrial like equipment and vehicles, break into these oil refinery sites and steal oil from these, which I'm not exactly crying a river for petrochemical companies in Texas, which are making billions of dollars in profit a year. But apparently oil field theft is a big issue and leads to like more than $30 million of lost revenue a year. So I just found that so interesting. These are like professional career criminals who it's a very like kind of like Ocean's 11, like interesting. And maybe I was like, oh, this sounds like a cool plot for a movie. Especially you could do like a fun like Robin Hood movie where these guys are stealing from these giant oil companies. That'd be cool. But Jim Wright created and leads the Stop Theft Task Force, which coordinates between the Railroad Commission and law enforcement and energy corporations to find these people that are stealing from these energy companies. Because God forbid the Railroad Commission actually prosecute and enforce regulation against against petrochemical companies. No. One of our priorities is going to be helping stop the theft of their product. Whatever, it's fine. Regulation in Texas is so backwards. It's insane. Controversies and scandals for Jim Wright have nothing to do with his tweets. But like I've already kind of indicated on these slides for Jim Wright, before running for election to the Railroad Commission, Wright gave thousands of dollars in campaign donations to railroad commissioners. So before he was on the Railroad Commission, what is that? Before he was on the Railroad Commission, he gave thousands of dollars in campaign donations to railroad commissioners, which directly oversaw regulation that regulated his businesses that help oil companies be in compliance with the Railroad Commission regulations. He donated thousands of dollars to their campaigns, and they directly regulated companies that he owns. He currently owns or has financial interests in at least 28 oil and gas waste companies that the Railroad Commission directly regulates and oversees. He currently serves as CEO of both Green Energy, I think is Greenergy, I think is how you're supposed to say that, of both Greenergy Companies LLC and Environmental Evolutions National Incorporated. Greenergy USA specifically advertises its expertise in securing Railroad Commission permitting. So he is the CEO of Greenergy USA, and on their website, they advertise, hey, oil companies, we're really great at securing permits from the Railroad Commission. Oh, it just so happens our CEO is on the Railroad Commission. And while on the commission, he has voted to relax agency fees and enforcement penalties for companies like the ones he owns that he has financial interests in, and has renewed the permits for a waste facility company where his own companies dump waste and whose owners contributed to his campaign. So the owners of this company, so he owns a waste management company. So like the oil companies over here, they drill stuff out of the ground. They produce a lot of toxic waste. They give that to Jim Wright's company. Jim Wright takes that toxic waste to a dumping site. And that dumping site is owned by a separate dumping site company. That dumping site company gave tons of money to Jim Wright's campaign. Hold on, what's the timeline here? Oh yeah, that dumping site company gave tons of money to Jim Wright's campaign and then applied for a permit, and Jim Wright approved their permit. Like, obviously he's going to approve their permit. He's not going to like look into their company and look into their violations of regulations very strictly because he financially benefits from them having a permit. It's an insane conflict of interest and is a manifestation of the corruption of the Railroad Commission. But I guess that's the least amount of corruption that's happening on the Railroad Commission. So fine. And he also pushed for the use of treated oil field waste as railroad building material, but that business model of using treated oil field waste as road building material, that business model is one that he owns companies that are permitted to pursue. So he owns companies that make road building material out of oil field waste, and on the Railroad Commission has pushed for the Railroad Commission to incentivize people to like he's pushing for incentives for companies that he owns. Crazy. So yeah, just I mean, flagrant corruption on the Railroad Commission. But what else is new? Highlights from his campaign website include his intent to deregulate energy corporations, which again, number one priority for these guys who their entire job is to regulate the oil and gas industry. Their number one priority is to deregulate energy corporations, plug oil wells abandoned by energy corporations, which one, bare minimum, two, why are the energy corporations not doing that? Why would the Railroad Commission be responsible for it? And then three, defend landowners and surface rights, and also resist increased federal regulation of energy corporations. So it's not enough that we're going to roll back Texas regulation on energy corporations as much as humanly possible, but we're going to fight any attempt for the federal government to regulate these energy corporations as well. So those are your two candidates for Texas Railroad Commission. Any questions before we move on to... Oh, yeah, Court of Criminal Appeals. Moving on, we are almost done with the Republican candidates, and we'll then be moving on to the Democratic candidates. But we're going to talk a little bit less about the Democratic candidates because they are just a little bit more reasonable and sensible. So I don't have to spend so much time being like, hey, look, isn't this insane? Goodness. Anyone still here? Did we lose everybody? Okay, moving on to the last item. If you are voting in the Republican primary, moving on to the last item that you will find on your ballot, which is judge for the Court of Criminal Appeals. Texas has essentially two Supreme Courts. The Texas Supreme Court, which oversees civil cases, and the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals, which oversees criminal cases and criminal appeals. This is going to not have a lot of details in it because the whole point of like being a judge, especially on a court as high as the Court of Criminal Appeals, the whole point is to be impartial. And so if you're like strongly advocating for certain policy positions while you're campaigning, then that puts you in jeopardy of like being called biased towards certain positions that you might be ruling on as a judge. So neither Thomas Smith nor Allison Fox go into a lot of detail on their campaign websites. So we're not going to talk a lot about either one of these candidates, but we'll go into some details about their background and history. And we'll read like an excerpt from each of their websites. In the primary, Allison Fox, who is clearly the more qualified candidate of these two, Allison Fox won the majority of votes with 31.3% of the vote, and Thomas Smith won 30.7% of the vote. The Texas Court of Criminal Appeals is the state's highest criminal court. In addition to hearing appeals from lower courts, the court hears all death penalty cases as well as habeas corpus appeals from convicted felons who claim they were unlawfully punished or detained. The 9 members are elected statewide and are currently all Republican, surprise, surprise, in the state of Texas. The first candidate that we're going to talk about for Court of Criminal Appeals is Thomas Smith. He holds a degree in law. That would be preferred. He worked as legal counsel for Ken Paxton when Ken Paxton was a state senator, and he was made an assistant attorney general when Ken Paxton was elected as attorney general in 2015. So Thomas Smith's career very closely linked to Ken Paxton. If you like Ken Paxton, you probably like Thomas Smith. If you don't, you probably won't. When he was an assistant attorney general For Ken Paxton, he served as a special assistant to the Deputy Attorney General for Criminal Justice, which is the position that he holds today in the Texas Attorney General's office. He helped craft legislation to increase criminal penalties for human trafficking convictions, prevent the state from taking adverse action against foster care or adoption agencies for actions based on their sincerely held religious beliefs, which is crazy. So like adoption agencies in Texas can refuse to place a child into the home of a family that they consider to be like a same-sex couple or non-Christian, or they're not married, etc. Thomas Smith passed laws that make it harder to sue foster care and adoption agencies for refusing to place kids in families that they don't like, essentially. And he also worked to craft legislation that protected churches from being compelled to perform same-sex weddings. So those were some of his priorities in the Attorney General's office. This is just a snippet from his campaign website because there's really not a lot on it. His philosophy and why he is running, he says in his words, this is a quote, "We are in danger of losing our country and even our beloved state of Texas. Activist judges running rogue courts who shred the Constitution and the rule of law are fueling that. When Republicans vote for a judicial candidate, they expect the Constitution and the rule of law to be protected above all else. They do not expect judges to betray the Constitution and the people by making law from the bench. I'm running to keep Texas safe and ensure that justice is served by restoring a conservative, limited judicial philosophy to cases before the court. Our state can no longer afford destructive judicial activism." Sounds like a big problem in Texas, but that's going to be one of his big priorities. The other candidate running for Court of Criminal Appeals is Allison Fox. She holds degrees, multiple degrees in law, and she operated her own legal firm before becoming a staff attorney for the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals in 2013. So she's directly worked for and with the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals in the past, has a lot of experience that would be relevant to the position that she is seeking to hold. From 2018 to 2021, she served as director of the Ethical Disclosure Unit and Conviction Integrity Unit for the Bexar County District Attorney's Office. So, like, if people felt like they were unjustly prosecuted by the DA's office, they could lodge a complaint with her, and she would be responsible for making sure that justice happened there. And in 2021, she began work as Chambers attorney for the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals. So working with the Court of Criminal Appeals again, this is the position that she holds today. As Chambers attorney, she drafts in-depth legal analysis for Court of Criminal Appeals judges, ensuring that they are well prepared for ruling on cases. So she basically is like a researcher, like a legal researcher and opinion writer for Court of Criminal Appeals judges, which sounds like it would be a very useful job to have experience in if you were running for Court of Criminal Appeals. A snippet from her campaign website is this quote: "My life and decisions are guided by my Christian faith." Okay. This sounds like the kind of thing I want in one of the highest courts in the land. "I am an active member of the Catholic Church, where I have served as a Sunday school teacher, confirmation sponsor, member of Catholic Daughters of America, assistant mentor to Junior Catholic Daughters of America, and Project Racial, a healing ministry for those who suffer because of an abortion experience. I believe faith and justice go hand in hand, that our legal system is strongest when it reflects the moral truths rooted in Scripture. My commitment to serve extends beyond the courtroom, whether it's serving as an at-large director for the State Bar of Texas or chairman of the board of the Taylor Housing Authority or mentoring young people in the church. I believe in being the hands and feet of Christ in my community. So this is the primary blurb about herself on her website. And if you love the fact that she devoted more than half of it to talking about how much of a huge Christian she is, maybe this is your candidate. If you don't love that, maybe it's not. And those are your two candidates for Court of Criminal Appeals. Whew. Any questions before we move on to the Democratic ballot? So if you are voting in the Republican primary runoff, we have gone through every single candidate that is going to be on your ballot here. We've talked about all of those races, and now we're moving on to talk about all of the candidates that are on the Democratic primary runoff ballot. We have 5 different races, the first of which is the race for United States Representative for District 14 between Richard Davis and Thurman Bartee, which this one gets kind of nuts. I said that the Democratic candidates were kind of the more level-headed ones, but this one is kind of crazy. So in the primary, Richard Davis got a lot more of the vote than Thurman Bartee did. He got 44% of the vote. Thurman Bartee got 31%. Whoever wins this primary is going against Randy Weber, and they're just not going to beat Randy Weber. So I'm kind of this is going to be a theme for a lot of these Democratic candidates. Kind of wasted my breath on a lot of these because we live in Texas, which is a profoundly Republican area. We live in Southeast Texas, which is a very richly Republican area. And the District 14 is a district in Southeast Texas. That district, you won't see District 14 on your ballot if you don't live inside of it. And this is the map for District 14. Randy Weber is the current representative for District 14. Like I said, these Democratic candidates aren't going to win this one, unfortunately, because they would be better than Randy Weber is because he's a douche. But District 14 goes all the way down here into like the Freeport area past Galveston and comes all the way up here into Beaumont. So if you are in the Jefferson County area and you live in like Nederland, Port Neches, Groves, or Port Arthur, you are squarely inside District 14. If you're in like the south end of Beaumont, then you are also pretty inside District 14. But a lot of Beaumont is not inside District 14. So be surprised if you don't see District 14 on your ballot if you go and you vote in the Democratic primary. This is going to be a running theme for a lot of these Democratic candidates. They ain't gonna win these elections, especially for something like District 14, which is in a very heavily Republican area of a very heavily Republican state. Unfortunately, because I like Richard Davis. He seems kind of nice, but they ain't gonna win this one. But we're going to go over them anyways so that you can be informed whenever you are voting in the Democratic primary runoff. This will be U.S. representative at the federal level in the U.S. House of Representatives, and U.S. representatives, along with U.S. senators, are responsible for passing federal laws and an annual budget to fund the military and federal agencies. Representatives also exclusively initiate all revenue-raising bills and wield the sole power of impeachment, which has become an increasingly direct check on the executive branch and a reflection of immediate public sentiment. The two candidates for District 14 are Richard Davis and Thurman Bartee. We're going to talk about Richard Davis first. He served in the U.S. Army from 1971 to 1984. He has a degree in business administration. He owned and operated a business services company in the Dallas area, which did bookkeeping and tax consulting. But he later sold that business and worked as an accountant for a residential construction plumbing company. And he retired, I think, from that company. Like, he worked there for a long time. But he retired in 2015. He has served as the president and treasurer for the Garland area Democratic club up in the Dallas area. So heavily involved with his local Democratic Party. Because he has not held public office before, I don't have any legislative accomplishments for him, so we're not going to cover any of those. We're going to go straight to highlights from his campaign website. We also don't have a controversies and scandals page because we're not going to have one of those for a lot of these Democratic candidates because they just aren't as nuts as some of our Republican candidates are. But highlights from Richard Davis's campaign website include his intent to support fair housing. These are in order as they appear on his website. Support fair housing, equitable education funding, and reforms that eliminate racial bias in the criminal justice system. Sounds good. Support redistricting reform and campaign finance transparency. Defend women's rights to access healthcare, contraceptives, and abortions. Advocate for inclusive schools and mental health resources that ensure every student feels safe and valued. Stand up for fair wages, safe working conditions, and the right of workers to organize and negotiate collectively while at the same time working with employers to promote productivity and innovation. Okay. Fight to close corporate tax loopholes and end price gouging practices, and work to lower out-of-pocket healthcare costs, reduce drug prices, and strengthen the Affordable Care Act. All that sounds great. It sounds a little bit like, hey, ChatGPT, write me something that Democrats will love, like write me a campaign platform that liberals will love. But I mean, I'm not liberal, but I am certainly left-leaning, and it sounds good to me, so... That's Richard Davis. The second candidate for U.S. Representative for District 14 is Thurman Bartee. He has a degree in political science, but he didn't work in political science immediately. He was instead a licensed funeral director and embalmer. Gross. And he also served as an associate pastor at First 6th Street Baptist Church in Port Arthur. Thurman Bartee is real big in local Port Arthur politics, as you will see. In 1994, he was elected as the first Black Justice of the Peace for Precinct 8 of Jefferson County in the Port Arthur area, and then was elected in 2019 as the mayor of Port Arthur, and just recently, I can't remember if he lost re-election or if he just didn't seek re-election. But he was most recently the mayor, and now he is not the mayor anymore and is running for U.S. Representative for District 14. He was mayor of the city. Some of his legislative accomplishments, because he has held legislative a public office in the past. Some of his legislative accomplishments include the fact that he was mayor of the city during COVID and during numerous severe weather events, including 3 hurricanes. He also secured significant federal funding for long-term city improvements, including tens of millions of dollars for water waste treatment, water main improvements, Wi-Fi in city parks, a new health department vaccination center, and more. So that sounds good. He's securing federal funding for resources for the city. He also negotiated a 3-year collective bargaining agreement with both the Port Arthur Police and the fire unions, which takes skill to be able to do. So he did that. Thurman Bartee's tenure in Port Arthur politics has not been without scandal or controversy, though, because he was suspended from his position as Justice of the Peace in 2004 due to a series of serious misconduct filings by the Texas State Commission on Judicial Conduct. Allegations of his misconduct included, first of all, insane, intervening in a police investigation against his brother-in-law after his brother-in-law was stopped for drunk driving. He also was accused of punching a juvenile in the chest, hitting a juvenile on the head with his knuckles, all of this in his courtroom. handing his belt to parents and encouraging them to beat their children in the courtroom, and threatening to engage in sexual relations with wives of county jail inmates while they were incarcerated, which is insane. He ultimately resigned and later was permanently barred from ever holding judicial office in the state of Texas. The Port Arthur voters must not have minded very much, though, because they elected him the mayor after that. But yeah, insane. His brother-in-law gets pulled over for drunk driving. I guess the cops call him, like they recognize that that it's his brother-in-law. They're like, "Hey, you better get down here." He shows up. He's like, "Come on, we can kind of like, just fix this up and get him out of trouble. Let me drive his car back to like his house or whatever." And the cops are like, "We definitely found like cocaine in his car." And he's like, "Oh, well then I better not drive his car." And so he did not drive his car, but like I tried to intervene in that investigation, which is an insane misuse of his authority as justice of the peace, to say the least. So that's Thurman Barty. Some of the highlights from his campaign website include his intent to fight for policies that help local business and economic development. Okay, that's his number one priority. Increasing funding for teachers, and modernizing classrooms, addressing homelessness as a mental health crisis, which cool. Increasing funding for infrastructure, energy reliability, and strengthening the Affordable Care Act. So cool policies from Thurman Barty. Those are your candidates for U.S. Representative for District 14, Richard Davis and Thurman Barty. I'm going to go tinkle. I will be right back. Moving on to candidates for Lieutenant Governor. Dan Patrick is our current Lieutenant Governor, and he's an insane person. So these two candidates will go up against Dan Patrick. He's running for re-election, right? I think he was unopposed, or either he was unopposed or he won his primary outright. Yeah. The two candidates for Lieutenant Governor, the two Democratic candidates for Lieutenant Governor in the primary runoff are Vicky Goodwin and Marco Isaias Velez. Not quite sure how to say that. But in the primary, Vicky Goodwin got 48% of the vote, and Marcos Velez got 31.5% of the vote. The Lieutenant Governor, if you're not aware, is the second highest executive in the state, and they preside over the state Senate and can heavily influence the state budget. The Lieutenant Governor is in charge of the state's agenda and has final say when there's a tie vote on a piece of legislation. This gives the office a lot of influence over which bills make it to the governor's desk. So this is a really important position in the state of Texas. The first candidate that's going to be on your ballot is Vicky Goodwin. She has degrees in marketing, government, and public affairs. She worked as a systems analyst for the Office of the Attorney General, training specialists on the state's child support enforcement system. She is the owner and operator of Kids at PC, which contracts with Austin schools to teach children computer literacy skills. That's cool. She is the owner and operator of Goodwin and Goodwin Real Estate. That's less cool. She was elected in 2018 to the Texas House of Representatives in District 47. That's in the Austin area. That is the position that she holds to this day. Because she has held public office, we have access to some of her legislative accomplishments, which include the fact that she authored Katie's Act in 2023, which requires child care organizations be notified in writing of a child's swimming ability and provide U.S. Coast Guard approved flotation devices to at-risk children during water activities. Katie, I guess, was a girl who drowned at a child care facility. She helped to create the Texas Food Security and Resiliency Council to develop a state food system security plan and administer grants to increase the security and resiliency of Texas's food systems. Cool. She co-authored legislation to increase salaries for state employees and provide a cost of living adjustment to retired teachers. Cool. She authored HB 1463 to amend the Texas Election Code to make it easier for voters who have recently given birth to qualify to vote for mail, which didn't pass because we want voting to be as difficult as possible in Texas. Highlights from her website include her intent to oppose the school voucher program, increase, and Vicki Goodwin's website, I just remembered. Vicki Goodwin's website is incredible. It follows the same format that Tiffany Perkins' website followed, which is why I liked Tiffany Perkins' campaign and website so much, and why I ultimately reached out to her to try to get her on the stream. Vicki Goodwin follows the same format, which is she has like 3 or 4 main policy goals, which are like opposing the voucher program, protecting water, making housing more affordable, and restoring reproductive health care for Texas. Like those are like her 4 big, put them on a bumper sticker kind of easy to truncate policies that she's advocating for. But on her campaign website, you can click on each one of those 4 policies and get a whole nother like page that goes into like paragraphs and paragraphs. We're talking about like 6-7 paragraphs on each one of these policies, talking in detail about the ways that she's going to pursue each one of those main core campaign policies, which is why I've tried to import that onto the slide by listing a bunch of different policies for each point, because all of the policies are listed under each one of those main policies. So this is like the education one, the education tab, and she intends to oppose the school voucher program, increase teacher pay, which is great, reduce standardized testing, which is great, increase state funding for public schools, which is great, and and oppose religious education in Texas, in Texas public schools, which is great. And then she has like a tab for water. She intends to fight data center consumption of clean water. Awesome. Screw data centers. Increase conservation measures against big water users. Awesome. Update and repair water transportation and storage infrastructure, and expand water recycling. Cool. And then her third tab is about housing. She wants to increase access to affordable housing, incentivize landlords to charge fair rent by lowering inspection cost caps, which, yeah, sure. Automatically enroll homeowners into the homestead exemption program as part of like their closing process, which why that isn't already the case is beyond me. And deregulate the residential construction industry, which, whatever. She's a real estate person, I guess. And then her last point is on healthcare, which is restore Texas access to reproductive health care, expand Medicaid coverage, focusing Medicaid expansion on postpartum care, which is cool, and increase mental health resources. So Vicki Goodwin, great campaign, great policies, cool legislative experience. She seems cool. And I'm torn here because Vicki Goodwin is running a really good campaign, but Marcos Velez is a union guy and a cool union guy. Like some of his personal background is after high school, he began working as a mechanic and area operator in oil refineries. During this period, he joined and became increasingly active in the United Steelworkers Trade Union, the USW. In 2015, he participated in a national USW strike at the Lyondell-Basel refinery in Houston. It was the largest national refinery strike in the U.S. since 1980, and actually, like other places, kind of won pretty big in that national strike. But at Lyondell-Basel, I think they didn't win a lot of what they were advocating for. But they did make wins. They secured like increased pay and increased benefits. So I mean that's a win. They just they had a mixed reaction to how great this strike went. But after participating in that USW strike, he got a lot more involved with USW and in the union. Afterwards, he began working for USW International as a full-time union rep and negotiator, and currently serves as assistant director of USW District 13, which covers Arkansas, Louisiana, Oklahoma, and Texas. I mean, like he's way like high up in a very high level in a huge labor union in the United States, and just spends his days advocating for workers. Like that's awesome. Like more of those as elected officials, please. Though I will say, his campaign website is not as his campaign priorities are not as great as Vicky Goodwin's was, in my opinion. Highlights from he's never held public office, so I don't have any of his legislative accomplishments. But highlights from his campaign website include his intent to work to lower costs of living by cutting property taxes without taking money from our public schools. I don't care about cutting property taxes, man. Just lower the cost of living in all the other ways that don't take revenue away from the state to be able to offer me services. Increase property taxes on rich people, like advocate for income taxes in Texas, something that's actually a progressive form of taxation, not property taxes. So, whatever. Cut property taxes, that's fine. Without taking money from our public schools, he wants to really prioritize. He's like, we're not going to take money from schools in order to cut your taxes. He wants to work to increase wages. He wants to support public schools and raise teacher pay. Sounds cool. He wants to protect rural water and farmland while supporting ranchers and farmers. Cool. He wants to prioritize legislation and ensure seniors have stable, affordable access to housing, just seniors though, healthcare and utilities, and push for property tax relief again, and appraisal reforms just for seniors. We just had a massive tax cut for seniors. What are we cutting seniors' taxes for? Like, I can understand like cutting a poor, like lower class, even kind of middle class seniors. But we're losing millions of dollars, billions of dollars in property tax income by continuing to cut property taxes. So, his platform is not as great as Vicky's, I don't think. But his background is awesome. He seems like a boss in a good way. And yes, those are your two Democratic primary runoff candidates for lieutenant governor. Your two Democratic primary runoff candidates for Attorney General are Nathan Johnson and Joe Jaworski. Nathan Johnson got a large portion of the vote in the primary with 48.1% of the vote, almost got to that 50%. Joe Jaworski was the second most vote getter with 26.4%. If you didn't know, the Attorney General is the top lawyer in Texas, representing or defending the state in mostly civil litigation. The Attorney General can bring forward or participate in lawsuits against the federal government, corporations, or others on behalf of the public, as Paxton has done over immigration and abortion policies. The Attorney General can also make legal interpretations and issue opinions on legal questions. So, really important. Nathan Johnson is going to be the first candidate on your ballot for Attorney General if you're voting in the Democratic primary runoff. He has a degree in law. He worked for Scheinfeld, Maley, and Kay before co-founding his own law firm, Spector and Johnson PLLC, focusing on commercial litigation like contract disputes and bankruptcy claims. Okay. He was elected in 2018 to the Texas State Senate for District 16 in the Dallas area. That is the position that he holds today. In the Texas Senate, he has devised and secured $2 billion in state funding for the development and deployment of a backup power grid system. In 2023, he passed he secured that funding because we all remember how, held together by shoestring and bubblegum the Texas power grid is, and how ridiculous it is that we can't connect to the national grid. Why Nathan Johnson would be advocating for connecting to the national grid and instead be advocating for building more backup infrastructure for our already crumbling infrastructure. I mean, I guess it's something, but that's fine. In 2025, he authored SB 232, creating the Live Well Texas program, which expanded Medicaid eligibility under the Affordable Care Act, bringing health coverage to an estimated 1 million low-income Texans. Cool. He also sponsored SJR 47, which proposed a constitutional amendment to create a $3 billion Alzheimer prevention and research fund. You might have remembered voting on that constitutional amendment last year. He also authored legislation that last year? Yeah. He also authored legislation that reformed construction law, like bills to more adequately ensure subcontractors are paid even if a general contractor mishandles money, or bills that allow contractors to refuse owner-directed changes if the estimate cost exceeds 10% of the original contract price. Who cares? The bills that made regulation for apartment housing designs on small urban lots more flexible. Fine. He also filed legislation to permit the sale of THC products to adults 21 and over. Cool. He makes a big deal about like crossing the aisle and being bipartisan, which actually can like securing benefits for your constituents in a state like Texas does kind of require some level of bipartisan legislation, but you don't have to be bragging about all the time how much Republicans love you. So I don't know. Cool. Some of his controversies, and I debated whether or not to even include this, but if somebody like Googled him, they would probably have found this. And I didn't want to seem unthorough on my third hour into this election guide. In Ken Paxton's impeachment hearing, he voted to acquit Ken Paxton on 2 of the 16 impeachment charges. He voted to charge him on the other 14. It's just 2 of them he didn't consider there to be enough evidence for, which, whatever. I mean, fine. That's kind of part of his, like, I'm reasonable, I'm not crazy, and emotional and politically extreme. Like, that's kind of that shtick. Anyways. Highlights from his campaign website include his intent to partner with other attorneys general to sue the Trump administration in an effort to block the administration's illegal actions. Cool. Protect consumers and promote corporate competition should be one of the top priorities for the attorney general. Investigate and prosecute corrupt political officials. Cool. Let's hope he starts with Christy freaking Craddock. Partnering with local district attorneys instead of antagonizing them. Reject the shock and awe border policy of the Trump administration while supporting increased enforcement against undocumented immigrations and restricting future immigration. Like I said, he doesn't phrase it that way, but what he's advocating for, he's like, we still have to be tough on the border. Like that's what he's advocating for. So again, like he's like, oh, I'm the centrist, bipartisan candidate. Dumb. But he seems nice enough, I guess. The second candidate for Attorney General on the Democratic primary runoff ballot is Joe Jaworski. He holds degrees in law and Spanish literature. Interesting. He served as a law clerk in the Fifth Circuit of the United States Court of Appeals. In 2007, he founded his own law firm, the Jaworski law firm in Galveston, specializing in civil litigation and personal injury cases. I've never seen one of these billboards, but I would imagine he's like one of those guys, like one of these billboard lawyers like that. He was elected in 2000. He was elected in 2000 to the Galveston City Council, and then was elected in 2008 as the mayor of Galveston but he did lose re-election in 2012 for reasons that are interesting, according to him. Part of his accomplishments on the city council and as the mayor were that he served as the mayor during Ike and led post-Ike recovery efforts. And this is like his most interesting policy as mayor. In the wake of catastrophic public housing loss due to Ike, Jaworski pushed for rebuilding public housing in mixed income housing developments, which is awesome. The Galveston Housing Authority built almost 500 units of mixed income public housing in the wake of Jaworski pushing for this. Mixed income housing is typically you have like low income housing or like Section 8 housing or whatever, housing for the poorer people. And nobody wants that to be in their backyard. And so they put all that in the worst part of town and they concentrate it all together, which whenever you concentrate extreme poverty and wealth inequality in a certain area, it has all kind of deleterious effects, including increasing crime. And so over the years, since like the 60s, people have been arguing that we shouldn't concentrate. I think that they call it deconcentrating low income housing. We shouldn't concentrate low income housing in one area. We should mix it among all the other income housing as well. So like you have this whole area that is some nice houses and apartment complexes, and we'll put a low income housing complex, like an apartment complex, in that neighborhood, and then we'll build some houses over in this nice neighborhood, and we'll put like some duplexes in this nice neighborhood. And that way, whenever you spread it around, not only does that avoid the deleterious effects of concentrating these poorer people, but it also gives them connections with like nicer parts of town and with people that have more money that they can build better relationships with to advance, and hopefully get out of poverty. Mixed income housing is great. And it's a hard thing to push for because you're actively asking people to take low income housing in your backyard. And so you have all these like not in my backyard activists, NIMBY activists who don't want low income housing in their neighborhood. And so he lost that re-election campaign in 2012 for mayor, and he says that he lost because of the backlash. It was tremendously unpopular that he was advocating for this mixed income housing, but he continued to advocate for it, even though it was very unpopular for him, because it was good for people, which is cool. He says that was the reason why he lost the 2012 re-election campaign for mayor. He led an effort of the Galveston Island Tree Conservancy to plant 40,000 new trees across the island as well after Ike. So doing cool things as mayor. He's running for attorney general now, and highlights from his campaign website for attorney general include his intent to enforce laws that expand voter access. That's cool. One of the examples that he gives is requiring high schools to offer voter registration. That sounds awesome. Talk about like really great, like get out the vote initiatives in schools and really pulling people like at a young age into participating in their civic duty to like participate in democracy. That's a cool policy. I like that. Support. He also intends to support lawmakers who champion clean energy initiatives and prosecute polluters, which you would think is the bare minimum, but we don't even do the bare minimum in Texas. Increase Texans' access to reproductive health care, specifically returning to the Roe v. Wade standard of care up to fetal viability. So he's like one of these guys who's like, there, no further. But he also intends to support increasing wages and protect workers' rights to organize. Awesome. Having like the AG be on the side of like worker organization is great. Work to expand Medicare in an effort to save rural hospitals and lower local taxes. Oppose the school voucher program and support affordable or free community college. Cool. Legalize personal use of marijuana. Cool. And work to end for-profit prisons. So Joe Jaworski seems like a cool guy. That is those are your candidates for Attorney General on the Democratic primary runoff ballot. Our fave. How many more do we have? Just a couple. Our fave candidates for the State Board of Education for District 7 on the Democratic primary runoff ballot are Deborah Drake Ambrose and Tiffany Perkins. Tiffany Perkins has been on the broadcast and is coming back on the broadcast probably next Saturday. So look out for that. That's super exciting. Tiffany, by a significant margin, got the most votes in this election. But she did not get to that 50% margin. There was like 5 people in the State Board of Education race. So they split the vote amongst themselves. But Tiffany did get the most votes at 31.3%. Deborah Ambrose got 26.2%. If you don't know what the State Board of Education is, there are 15 districts within the State Board of Education, and they set curriculum standards and approve instructional materials for Texas public schools. The board also works closely with the Commissioner of Education and Texas Education Agency to develop policies and approve new charter schools. So hugely important as the Republicans in Texas are trying to increase the privatization of education in our state and increase the injection of religious extremist ideology into our instructional and educational material. Having strong leaders on the State Board of Education that can push back against that is incredibly important. So we have a runoff here between Deborah Ambrose and Tiffany Perkins, and whoever wins this runoff will go up against January 6er Julie Pickering, who is the Republican candidate for State Board of Education. She is our current State Board of Education rep for District 7, and she's a crazy person. We talked about Julie Pickering a lot in our last conversation with Tiffany Perkins, which is on my YouTube channel. You can go find that. And we'll probably talk about Julie Pickering some more because Julie Pickering is crazy. But we will talk about more. We will talk more about her in the fall, whenever we head to the midterms. That's exciting. The first candidate that's going to be on your ballot for State Board of Education for District 7 is Deborah Ambrose. Her personal history is she holds a degree in middle management, and she worked as a customer service manager for several companies, including Time Warner Cable. She also worked for the City of Port Arthur's Transit Department, which is important. We're going to talk about that in a minute. And she was elected in 2015 to the Port Arthur ISD Board of Trustees. She also served as Vice Chair Commissioner of the Port Arthur Housing Authority. Now, her time on the school board, I couldn't find a whole lot of like huge legislative accomplishments from that time, but she did serve as the school board president and presided over, while she was the president, presided over and voted for renaming 2 Port Arthur elementary schools, Dick Dowling Elementary, to Port Acres Elementary, and Robert E. Lee Elementary to Lakeview Elementary, which it's crazy to have elementary schools in a vastly majority black city. It's crazy to have elementary schools named after Confederate generals, but that's a thing. So while she was on the school board and while she was board president, they renamed those schools. Now, interestingly, there's this whole story about Deborah Drake Ambrose, and I don't quite know. I haven't been able to find. I looked everywhere for a resolution to this lawsuit to know if she's like been fully exonerated of like these allegations or what happened. But I'm going to give you the whole story and you kind of decide for yourself what's going on. Port Arthur News has been invaluable on so many of these candidates. How many bottles of water have you had? 2. Port Arthur News has been so invaluable on researching so many of these candidates, and they have a bunch of really great articles following, not enough, following this Deborah Ambrose story. So in 2016, remember, she was working at the Port Arthur Transit Department. And in 2016, she was fired and arrested for aggregate theft by a public servant and for 5 counts of tampering with a government record. She allegedly entered regular work hours when she was supposed to have entered sick leave or vacation hours, totaling $892 of supposedly stolen pay. Which, if you're going to steal from the city, $800 doesn't feel worth it to risk going to jail. But allegedly, she went on medical leave, and whenever she went on medical leave, she entered the hours that she should have entered as medical leave as like regular work hours, and therefore like didn't use any of her medical leave hours that she had accrued, and used work hours instead, and so therefore it was stealing. But 7 months after she was arrested and indicted. 7 months later, her case was dropped by Jefferson County District Attorney, when a transcript from an internal city hearing was given to the DA. In it, a supervisor of Ambrose was asked if she intended to steal, to which that supervisor replied, no, she did not intend to steal, which is very convenient that like the Neeland, I can't remember his first name, Kevin Neeland, maybe Neeland. Neeland is the intake officer for the Jefferson County DA and was at this time. And he's the one that gives quotes to the Port Arthur News. And he's like, oh, I don't remember which supervisor it was. Can't remember. Doesn't talk about how he got whatever this transcript is, but somehow he acquired this transcript of this internal meeting that they had at the city where they completely exonerated her and nullified his case against her. And Neeland even says, like, it seems like some weird shenanigans are happening here. This is weird. So then in 2017, the next year, Ambrose filed a lawsuit against the city for wrongful termination in which she alleges that the Port Arthur Transit Department office was a hostile workplace and that the transit general manager yelled at and threatened her. She reported the incident as threats of intimidation to the Port Arthur city manager and took family medical leave due to her distress caused by the incident. So she got yelled at. He was like, get out of my office, get out of my, like screaming at her. This caused her so much distress that she went and reported this to the city manager and took medical leave. And whenever she took that medical leave, that's when it wasn't the city manager. I'm almost positive it was the guy, the head of the transit department, like went into the computer and found that she had incorrectly entered these work hours. And it was while on leave that the discrepancy with her time card was discovered and she was fired. Ambrose claims that the falsified time card was a pretext for her termination and that she was really fired because she complained about the workplace harassment and because of her extended medical absence. And the PA News went to go talk to the city manager about this, and the city manager wouldn't talk to them. And so then they went to the guy who leads the transit department, and he did talk to them and was like, you know, could it have been an accident that she entered these hours wrong? Maybe. It's probable, but it's not. I mean, it's possible, but it's not probable. And while he's talking to the reporter from PA News, the city manager finds out that the reporter is in his office and busts in and is like, you have to get out of here. You know, stop answering her questions, and kicks the reporter out. Like, it's a very weird. Port Arthur is an insane city, and insane things happen there, as we saw with Thurman Barty. And as we're going to see with some other stuff whenever we talk about the municipal elections. Port Arthur is an insane city, and insane things happen there. And this is insane. So I don't know. I couldn't find anywhere what the results of this lawsuit are. If the lawsuit found that it was indeed a hostile workplace and she was exonerated, I would have thought that I would have found that somewhere. And that does clear her of like any, if I'm considering her as a candidate, I don't want somebody who was, indicted for this crime, who actually committed this crime. But if she's just the victim of like a hostile workplace environment where they are like pursuing her in this way, just vindictively, then I shouldn't hold that against her as a candidate. So I don't know what to do. I'm giving you all of the information that I know of. Go and read the Port Arthur news stories because they're really good. If you just search like Deborah Ambrose lawsuit city, Port Arthur news, like you'll find it. But it's an interesting story, but I wanted to put that here in detail because whenever you Google Deborah Ambrose, this is like one of the main things that comes up. So highlights from her campaign's Facebook. She doesn't have a campaign website. Include her intent to ensure equitable funding for all school districts in District 7, increase teacher pay, reduce testing, and protect public education from privatization. Those sound like good things. Our second candidate for State Board of Education for District 7 is Tiffany Perkins. She holds degrees in English literature, and education. She worked as assistant director of study abroad and student exchange at Lamar University, as well as an adjunct English instructor at LIT. She also worked as a middle and high school English teacher at both Port Neches Groves High School and Monsignor Kelly Catholic School. So she's worked both in public schools and private schools. She is currently the owner and operator of Perkins with a Z Education, which is an online tutoring business. And these are highlights from her campaign website. If you want to know even more about Tiffany Perkins, from Tiffany Perkins, you can go watch my video that I did where I interviewed Tiffany Perkins on the stream. And we talked about all kind of things, including a lot of her priorities and what they will be if she is elected to State Board of Education. But one of the things that made me reach out to her to see if she wanted to come on the broadcast and talk to us was how well her points are listed on her campaign website. Whenever we talked about Vicki Goodwin, I talked about this, about how much I love the format of taking like three or four big picture, like main, quickly communicatable policy priorities, but then being able to elaborate on those with a lot of details. And that's how Tiffany Perkins' website is laid out, where she has like three main policy priorities, like academic freedom, protecting teachers, and opposing the voucher program. Those are like her three main policy priorities. But whenever you click on each one of them, it takes you to a page that is like a dozen paragraphs long of all the details of how and why that thing is a priority for her. And it's great. It's so well written. It's so detailed. It's a fantastic website. I highly recommend that you go and you look at it. But these are just some of the highlights, and those highlights include her intent to support academic freedom, protect students' freedom to learn, and teachers' freedom to teach without political interference, ensure public school TEKS are inclusive, accurate, and grounded in evidence, reject censorship disguised as parental rights, and keep political and religious indoctrination out of public schools. Oh, that sounds awesome. She also is committed to defending teachers from retaliation for teaching approved curriculum, supporting clear, stable academic standards so teachers can plan and teach confidently, and opposing policies that encourage harassment or surveillance of teachers. Sounds cool. And she also intends to oppose the voucher program, push back against ideological groups influencing curriculum in classrooms, which is more important now than ever. The new social studies program is about to be approved, or just was approved, which is insane. Like some of the stipulations for the way that they want to talk about civil rights, the civil rights movement, about like Muslims in America, like it's crazy. Like the insanity, the insane ideology that they're trying to inject into public school curriculum now is wild. And having somebody on the school board that can oppose that and oppose that effectively is great. So having her commitment to push back against ideological groups influencing curriculum in classrooms is a good thing. She also intends to fight for honest history, strong literacy, and evidence-based science, and to demand transparency and accountability from the TEA. That is Tiffany Perkins. And those are your two candidates for State Board of Education for District 7. Any questions before we move on to our last race for the primary runoffs? Okay, moving on to the last candidate of the primary runoffs, the last candidates of the primary runoffs. And this is going to be hyper local here, which is, this is the map for State Board of Education. If you need that, I forgot to include that, which is the race for Justice of the Peace for District 2 here in the Port Arthur area. If you do not live in the Port Arthur area or in this area here, in the it's getting into like Nederlandy areas, kind of. If you don't live in this area, then this will not be on your ballot. But if you do, then you will have to pick between Joseph Guillory or Brandon Barty, who is the son of Thurman Barty from earlier, as your choice for Jefferson County Justice of the Peace for Precinct 2. In the primaries, Joseph Guillory, who is the incumbent, got 41% of the vote. Brandon Barty got 34% of the vote. If you're not aware, a Justice of the Peace is a judicial officer for the county handling small claims, disputes, evictions, proceedings, and minor criminal offenses without the formal trappings of a district courtroom. The Justice of the Peace conducts inquests into unattended deaths, sets bail, and issues magistration warnings for arrested individuals performing marriage ceremonies, and presides over truancy and traffic cases specific to Class C misdemeanors. This truancy bit is why you saw Barty like abusing children so much, because he deals with truancy cases. But yeah, Guillory or Barty Jr. will deal with all of that if elected. Joseph Guillory served as deputy sheriff in St. Tammany Parish in Louisiana. He owns several businesses in Port Arthur, including Guillory Transport, Guillory Outdoor Structures, and Guillory Lawn Care. He was elected in 2015 to the Port Arthur ISD Board of Trustees, and then was elected in 2022 as Justice of the Peace for Precinct 2 in the Port Arthur area. He also serves as minister at Rock Island Missionary Baptist Church. Highlights from his campaign website. It's almost impossible to find legislative accomplishments, legal accomplishments for Justices of the Peace. So I didn't find any. But highlights from his campaign website include his intent to ensure fair, impartial justice for all, which one would hope, operate with fiscal responsibility and open communication, modernize the office with tools that increase productivity, accessibility, and efficiency, and to strengthen mentoring programs. That is Guillory. And then we have Barty. He has a degree in music education. He was elected in 2015 to the Port Arthur ISD Board of Trustees, the position that he currently holds. He also currently works as a site supervisor and funeral home attendant at Hannah's Funeral Home in Port Arthur. Some of his legislative accomplishments on the school board include serving as board president in 2016. And as board president, he oversaw an increase in teacher pay from approximately $42,000 to $52,000 annually, making the district one of the highest paid in the region. That's cool. He also established the Brandon Barty Scholarship to provide financial assistance to local students pursuing higher education. Cool. And Brandon has no campaign website. That's not true. Freak. I messed this up. This is the slide that I missed. Oh, whoops. This is the slide that I missed. Highlights from Brandon Barty's campaign website include his intent to uphold equal justice, which, one would hope, openly share court performance metrics, avoid conflicts of interest, and maintain a courtroom atmosphere of professionalism and fairness. I bet he has to say that because of his dad. Those are your candidates for Jefferson County Justice of the Peace for Precinct 2, and those are all of the candidates for the primary runoffs. Whew.